Welcome everyone to this work session for the special city council work session for March 2nd, 2020. Lindsay, could you call the roll?
Dora?
Here.
Cummins?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Manetza?
Here. First order of business for this work session is our first draft review of our fee schedule, presented by Amy Bessinger.
Good evening, thank you. So tonight I have before you, as you said, Mayor, the first draft review of the fee schedule. It's proposed fees for the fiscal year 2020-21. As you go through, you'll note the purple highlights indicates where staff has proposed a fee change from the year prior. We did review these with the department directors and supervisors. Pat and I, we sat with them, kind of went over the fees, reviewed it. So these are the proposed changes by each of the departments. They vary based on actual cost, administrative time, things of that sort. So we look forward to reviewing those and seeing anything. We also made just a few minor revisions to the draft schedule, just consistency for wording and formatting and things of that sort. So if you look currently and compare it to the current year, just slightly different in that regard, just to clarify a few things on the fee schedule to make it a little bit more readable. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Questions for Amy?
I was looking at some of these. I went to Public Works, page 7, I think it is. I don't know if this is an error or whatever, but it says here, Showmobile extension rental for residents went from $181 to $350, but then you went for non-resident for profit. Now this was resident for non-profit was that price, but when you went to non-resident for profit, it went from $725 down to $650. Why did we drop it? I mean, why are we charging more for?
Yeah, so I
why are
can
we
take a
charging
look
more
at that too.
for a resident than we are for somebody that's making money? It doesn't make sense to me. We should be charging them at least the $725, if not more. If we're going to raise it up for a resident nonprofit, we should be taking it for people that are making money. We should at least maintain the same price or raise it.
So I know Derek reviews those based on actual costs of his time and materials. So we can review that to make sure that we have the correct amount on there.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I just didn't think it was quite right. That's one of them.
Sure, I can double check that with Derek and check that calculation on there to make sure that's what he has.
Yeah, because it's for a profit. I don't know why we would lower it. It doesn't make sense to me. Anybody else have anything else they want to say? Otherwise, it doesn't look too bad. There's some other spots in there I had some questions with. I will send a memo out to you.
That'd be great, thank you.
I'll
take a
but
look at
that's
those.
the one I noticed right. It was just staring at me right away. I'm going,
Okay.
a nonprofit, resident nonprofit, either one, is actually had an increase, and then when it was for a non-resident for-profit,
Yeah,
we
and
had a decrease.
If you look at the numbers, the Showmobile rental, we propose going up to $475 for resident, and then the non-residents twice that, or $950.
Yeah,
And
I've
think
seen that,
maybe-
but I'm just talking about the
I got you. I'm just-
extension.
Yeah, and then you get to the extension, $350 for a resident, and I think maybe we meant to make it $700 for the non-resident, so it's twice as much. So it's twice as much for the Showmobile and twice as much for the extension.
Well, you had it at $181.25 for the extension last year. Now you want to raise it to $350 for a resident nonprofit. And then last year we had for the extension rental non-resident for-profit was $725, and you lowered it down to $650. I mean, why would we lower it?
Still, to try to make it twice as much as the residential fee would be the idea, so that
So we're
it's
going
doubling.
to tack more money onto our residents and then take money less for people that are making money.
Just trying to get the actual cost out of it, if we can. We can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, I just don't agree with it.
Anything else?
Oh, I've just noticed one right away. I was just going through it.
All right.
If anybody else had anything?
If anybody has questions, please ask.
Just because it's my first go-around with the fee schedule, if there's a respective board that oversees, say, for example, the community center or the cemetery board, do they also kind of get this draft to make some comments on whether or not they feel like the fee increases are, match up or are appropriate.
So the liaison for each of those boards will speak with them in regards to the fees and receive their feedback as well.
Okay.
Yes.
If there are other questions, or if you prefer to communicate with Amy separately, we'll be having a work session on this.
Already had some communication with Amy over the weekend and today, and I'm good.
Okay,
I'll probably have more.
probably.
Certainly.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, thank you. Next, Pat McGinnis talking about the residential garbage contract.
Thank you, Your Honor. The residential garbage contract was up this year as of December 31st, and we had been asking our waste hauler if they wanted to extend it to get us a proposal, so they have gotten us that. They're running on a month-by-month now since that contract expired. Some of you may have heard from some of your constituents that they did increase everybody's rate arbitrarily. I know I got an increase, and we've gotten many phone calls. I have been assured that they're going to reverse all those improper charges to make sure they're charging the correct amount, but they think it was pretty widespread, so they're going through their bills and getting those reversed. But they gave us a new proposal. The major changes would be that all residents would get a 95-gallon cart, a recycling cart. Currently, all residents who sign up for this service would get the 95-gallon cart. Currently, we have the smaller bin. Now you'd be using a 95-gallon cart, and instead of every week pickups of the recyclables, it would go to every other week. The current rates are proposed to go from $13.41 a month to $14.50 a month. For the hand-picked, which is either using your own bags or using your own cans, it would go from $12.35 to $14.50. So you can see that that's the same amount for the cart and the hand-picked. It's a deliberate effort by the garbage company. They've gradually been trying to get those closer together till they're the same thing. They want to encourage everybody to get the cart. It's just a more, it's a preferred way. They prefer to pick us up. It's easier for them for workers' comp cases and things like that. They've got the cart, the truck that comes around and picks them up. They'd rather have the guy stay in the truck and lift it up and get out and grab bags and chuck them into the truck. The bag program currently at $6.91 per month, plus $1.50 per bag. The new program would be $10.91 per month, so that's a huge increase. That's a $4 a month increase. Again, they're trying to get people off that program. If you look at the memo that I gave you in your packet, I noted how many people get each one of those types of services, and you can see that currently the vast majority of users use the 95-gallon cart, 2,813, whereas 724 do the hand pick, and only 54 people are left on the bag service. The initial proposal from the company was $15.25 per month. They agreed to take 75 cents per month per customer off if the city would help them with billing. If we put it on our utility bills, make it a city utility, so you'd get your water, sewer, and trash bill all together, and then we'd send the money to the company. They'd save 75 cents per customer per month is a pretty good savings, and I think it adds up to about 5% discount, if you'd like to call it that. And it helps them because they don't have to have all those separate bills going out and collecting from all those different customers. And we're sending out water and sewer bills anyways, so we collect for them and pass the money on to the company. And then finally, currently the annual increases are based on the state CPI like we apply to our tax bills. They found that's lagged behind the CPI for water, sewer, and garbage. So they've asked that we index that according to the CPI. And it's historically 3 or just over 3% for the past several years. So there's some big increases, big changes for 1 year. If you're okay with that, I can put it together in a contract for your March 16th meeting. If not, I can prepare a request for proposals and go out and see what kind of bids we will get. There are probably 2 or 3 other companies in the area that would likely give us a bid, but based on a recent comparable study I did, we're unlikely to get a price much lower than $14.50 per month. I don't think we will get a lower price if we go out for bid, but we can always try.
When's the last time we were out for bid?
10 years ago. 5 years ago, it was the same sort of presentation. They gave us an increase. We did a comparable study. We found out we were cheaper than most surrounding communities. We were well below average, so we just stuck with it. It's the same story now. We're still less than average and not likely to get cheaper going out for bid, but we can do it and see how we do.
Do you think that they would continue to honor this proposal if we went out for bid and there was a successful low bidder? Would this be their bid?
I can't hold them to that. I would hope they would stick with it. They could, of course, put in whatever bid they want at their own risk, and I would find it a bit, and I've talked to them about, well, if we do decide to go out for bid, at some point I have to make their price public. I have to come to you and say, will you approve this contract? And if you say no, then I have to go out for bid, and they can bid on it. So at some point, and I was very clear, I thought it was a rather steep increase for one time, and I think they know what surrounding rates are, and they know we can't do much better than what they've proposed here, so that's why they've proposed that number. They claim not making money at this, but I think we hear that from most vendors. When we go out, they'll come back and say, boy, for you guys, we'll give you a really good price, and that's what you hear from them. That's what I expect to hear. So I would presume they are making money, otherwise they wouldn't be putting in a bid. Nobody comes and proposes to do business with you to lose money.
No, that's rare.
Not when they have exclusive rights in the town. So like, if you go out to the township, they have like 5 or 6 different ones that are out there. So when you were having exclusive, it's pretty different. Which is nice is that when we do have this, is that we have them only on there for certain days and they're not beating our roads up all over the place. As you notice, if you go out and around neighboring areas that have more than one, it really beats their roads up. Those things are heavy and they're slamming them on there. They do it. The thing I have is the same thing I had the last time when they came with the 95-gallon ones. There's 724 people that don't use it. I can guarantee you there's people, the reason why they don't have it, because they have no place to put it. I, for one, is one of them. My house and my lot is so small, I have a small little storage area I put my garbage can in so it's not out in view. If I have to get a 95-gallon, I'm putting it right out in the front. I'll put it out in the street somewhere and fill it up out there because I have no place to put it. It's just too big. I don't have that much garbage. There's only 2 of us in the house. And so do I need 95-gallon cart? I don't have that much for my recycles. I just have a small little bin, which works really nice. I can put away, but 95-gallon is huge. They're going to require us all to have 95-gallon. I'm dead against that.
Looks like handpick is still an option, though.
I know it's still an option, but they said it right here at the very beginning, all residents receive a 95-gallon recycling cart. And I go, and I have no place to put a 95-gallon.
Do you have a bin now?
I have a bin.
Okay, I can ask about that and see if somebody who doesn't have room for it can just keep the bin. It'd just get picked up every other week.
Yeah, because I fill the bin up once a week, but the only thing is I don't have no space to put a 95-gallon bin for recyclables.
So I guess the question for us tonight would be, Pat's looking for direction on whether we want to go out for bid or go with this.
If you want to go out for bid, but I myself personally, if you look around what the cost is, if you talk to your neighbors around here, you're going to find out this is a pretty competitive bid. It's actually a lot lower. And with the services they're offering us also, you don't get those kind of services at the cost that we're paying. So I'm pretty comfortable with it again. And if it goes up much higher, then we're not going to be there. But I still say that with the services at the schools for our leaf pickup program, picking up the white goods on a certain day and that for you, picking them up and taking them away. A lot of times, like my sister down in Battle Creek, you pay for every one of those things. It's above and beyond what the service is, and they're paying close to I think in Battle Creek it was close to $20 a month or something or better, plus all these extras you got to pay. So I think by them throwing some of those things in for us, I think we're getting a pretty good deal compared to what I think other places might have done. I really hate to say this, but my son-in-law works for Waste Management, but here we are with Republic, but they do give us a good price.
What else?
I know you had mentioned, Pat, that there was maybe some way that we could cut back on the convenience center, the time that they were open, and that would possibly help us with some better rates also?
I believe they told me they could maybe knock another 7 cents off if we closed the Lake Shore Middle School and White Pines drop-off centers. You know, that's money for people that pay for it, and, you know, I maybe use it every couple of years, you know, because they pick up yard waste at my house.
Yep.
So if I got, the couple times I've used it, it's when I've had a really big load and I don't want to wait and put it out, so I just bring it over there. But, yeah, you might find that a lot of people that use that are non-subscribers. Because why would you go over to the school and drop it off if
Yeah,
you put it out at your curb every week?
and they pick it up.
I use it every time. I use it every Saturday.
You use the drop-off center?
Yes, I do.
Oh.
And so does my neighbors.
Well, there's no understanding those Clinton Street people.
Hey, we don't like our leaves. We like to get rid of them. Even if it's on a Saturday, it's a good time because, you know,
Okay.
when they pick them up during the week, early in the week, you still got leaves coming down and you like to get rid of them. You don't want to hang on to them.
Okay. And 7 cents isn't a big, you know, 75
very
cents, that's a good chunk, but. And of course, I had mentioned before, there was the possibility of doing a direct bill for the whole city, which you seemed to think was a good idea, and I didn't think it was a bad idea, but didn't seem to have popular support.
Kind of lost traction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No, but these numbers include the city handling the billing
Yes,
and then just turning over the money, and then
yes.
the city would do that at no cost.
Well, I'd want to talk about that. We'd still have some more work to do on that, because I think we ought to get some small administrative fee, because it does cost us to track it and process all the bills and send them the money. So there'd be likely some small cost. You know, right now they're bidding $14.50, so we might go to $14.75 to cover the city's cost in doing that billing.
So that what people actually get charged would include the city's processing.
Correct. But without the city getting involved, it'd be $15.25 a month.
Okay.
So they'd still be saving 50 cents over letting the garbage company continue to do it.
For the 75 cents a month or the 50 cents, whatever it boils down to, you know, we're talking $6 to $9 a year. We're taking on a lot of liability for that $6 to $9 for folks who decide that they don't want to pay their bill, and we've already paid it. Now we're chasing delinquent bills and everything to that sort, and I wouldn't be in favor of us taking that on just for that reason alone.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because the reason we're very good at it is that we can put it on their utility bills. If they don't pay it, it goes on their tax bill. So it's 100% collections, which is why the company likes it. They don't have to worry about collections anymore, so they take that uncertainty out of their process. So we put it on our water and sewer bills. You know, what I worry about, what we would need to be clear with the company, is that in the event of a dispute, the customer's always right. You know, so if somebody called up and said, hey, they didn't pick up my garbage for 2 months, and there was an argument going back and forth, I'd say, you know, he said, she said, sorry, company, but, you know, I wouldn't want people to get the idea that all they have to do is call City Hall and they don't have to pay for their garbage, but I wouldn't want to get sucked into billing disputes. So we'd have to have a clear understanding with the company that the billing disputes they're going to have to handle. I don't think it'd be right to just say automatically 100% of the time the company's always right, because they make mistakes too. So we'd need to work that out. There would be some effort involved in doing that, so I would need some direction. If you don't want to go that route, we could leave it the way it is, and everybody would pay 15 1/4.
The thing that I'm kind of worried about is if a landlord pays the garbage bill right now, because if you have a renter in there, you want to make sure he has garbage service, because if you don't, and I've heard, you know, a lot of horror stories. In fact, when I was doing the trash, you know, the notices and stuff, that when people were leaving trash all over the place, usually it was tenants that didn't take care of their garbage. They didn't pay for the service. So a lot of times the landlords are paying for the service to make sure their tenants have garbage service, so they don't have a big problem later on when they move out. So if you put on the water bill and tenants don't like that, they can just go ahead and say, well, wait, I don't want garbage, and you know, it might increase, it might make the problem worse with trash around the city.
I'm with Mike. For $9 or less, it's not worth our hassle.
Yeah, I don't think so
I
either.
don't think so.
I like the idea of the city handling the billing, but I don't think that's that big of a risk, but I do think some valid points have been made. I could go either way on that. It'd be nice to save people money if we could. I guess that, getting back to the question, do we want Pat to go out for bids or not? Because otherwise we'd see this at our next meeting when it'd be an actual agenda item, and we could resolve that piece.
If Pat's comfortable with this, and I'm sure he's researched it plenty from what he has, relayed to us, and believes it's a good rate, I'm fine to move ahead with accepting this as it is, and with the exceptions of what we've talked about. I mean, work out the details, but I don't think we need to go out for bids.
Ryan, any thoughts?
I agree. I think
Okay,
Okay
what,
with it.
what I'll do is I'll make it so it's still direct customer pay, so we're out of it, so the rate will be 15.25, not 14.50. And I will also make sure that you can still get the smaller recycling tub if you want it.
Yes.
'Cause that makes sense, if somebody just flat out doesn't have room, but they want recycling, now you can always get the bag service, you can pay the extra and get the regular bag service, but that doesn't help you with recycling. So I'll verify those two things, if I can get that cleaned up, I'll put something on your agenda next time.
All right, and we'll keep in mind that city billing is an option. Apparently not a very popular one, but it's an option. It would save our people some money.
You know, if we get a lot of complaints after the new billings kick in, and you change your mind, we can always go to it. They're anxious to do it because it does save them a lot. Maybe we could hold them up a little bit and say, we want $1 off, not just 75 cents.
There you go.
Then we can all hold out on our bills for a couple months and make them chase us around,
Yeah, then
so,
we see our garbage pile up.
okay, I will get right on that.
All right. Anything else on this one for right now?
No, sir.
Okay, next item would be Chinook Pier Building C update.
All right. So I just have a brief update for you in regard to what we know today. So after the bid process, we were faced with a couple challenges. Let me just pull this up quick. Upon going out to bid, we only received proposals for 2 of the 3 portions of work. So we saw bids for remediation and restoration. The challenge was we did not receive any proposals for an adequate fix of the crawl space itself, which, as we know, is the major issue we are faced with. So this caused us to take a step back and re-engage with our engineer, Abbenmarsh, and with Fishbeck, our air quality inspection company of choice, in order to better inform our process and determine what work truly needed to be done to that crawl space in order to better inform our bid process going forward. At which point, we also re-engaged Fishbeck in establishing an official protocol for Building C and retesting for whichever remediation company would be chosen in the future. And in that process, in re-engaging those two firms, we learned some things that we didn't anticipate originally. According to the updated Fishbeck report, we learned that all the surrounding drywall around the base of the floor measured at a significantly elevated moisture level, and that would need to be removed. In addition, the subfloor and the floor joists were also saturated and will need to be removed and replaced. That's an expense we didn't anticipate originally, so that was noteworthy. Also, in engaging Abbenmarsh and Fishbeck, we asked Abbenmarsh to provide us with 3 overall options for adequately addressing the crawl space. That way, there were no questions if we were to go out to bid that it would get the job done appropriately. And you could see in your memo the 3 options they presented us with. Option A, in working with Abbenmarsh and Fishbeck, we ruled out for reasons of reliability. Neither Abbenmarsh nor Fishbeck felt comfortable with the reliability of a drainage system given the high water levels and the constant maintenance that would require with a drainage system and the cost that we would incur from that. So regardless of the crawl space solution, B1 or B2, if they were selected, and those are essentially filling the crawl space with concrete, we're looking at a fix that would exceed 100,000 essentially just for that crawl space. So with those updates, we felt it was necessary to bring that back before you, given that we are quickly approaching 200,000 with remediation and restoration in addition to that crawl space expense, rather than that original 100,000 that we originally anticipated. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Derek, can you come up? So between Derek and Ashley, I guess one question I have is a piece that we weren't told before, and I still find a little difficult to comprehend, is that the subfloor and floor joists are saturated and need to be replaced. In buildings A and B, we understood that the bottom cords of those trusses had been immersed, had been underwater for some period of time, but that the joists and the subfloor of building C had not been, had just been in a humid space. So now we're finding out that they're saturated and beyond repair?
Well, they will be, Your Honor. The moisture coming up from the gravel crawl space will continue to immerse those trusses with moisture. So to mitigate all of the moisture, we need to make sure it doesn't get there. So 3 options. One is to fill it in 2 different ways, or actually submerge those drain tiles so that moisture is taken away before it gets to the actual surface of the gravel. So that's what we're trying to mitigate there with those. It's not that they're actually been submerged today, no, but if we don't keep that water from getting there, it will.
Okay, well, it says here they are saturated, need to be replaced, so according to this, they're already there, that they're already beyond the point where you would try to save them.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to try to save them, no, from here forward.
Okay. All right.
So they are saturated or they're not saturated?
He says they are saturated with water now,
Okay.
even though they've never actually been in the water. They've just been in a humid space. And then when you talk about your option B to lower finished floor to grade, in other words, leave the structure of the building where it is and bring the floor down?
No, actually, so the structure is actually raised, right? We have
Structure is currently a couple feet above
yeah,
grade.
18 inches, 24 inches. So we can leave that, but the remaining deck and ADA ramps and all that are made of composite wood. They're a decking material, and they require maintenance annually. We go out there and make sure that the decking's flat and even, so we flip them over sometimes. But anyways, it takes maintenance. So to mitigate that maintenance, if we were to raise the building up, demolish the crawl space, and pour a slab on grade, we could lower then the building as is and put the building then on grade instead of raised. Now, as City Manager McGinnis discussed this with me, well, that puts that building at risk of flooding if the river continues to rise. So,
Well, yeah, this whole option didn't make a lot of sense to me, that you would actually lower the building, or lower the floor and not lower the building, or some combination of that.
yeah.
So I was having trouble understanding that option.
Well, I mean, just like the Marina building or the sailing club, those are all slab on grade buildings. And if we weren't dealing with historic water levels, we wouldn't think about, it wouldn't be an issue about putting it on grade. So we can, I thought about this since the memo. We could also, raise it 4 inches or put it on a raised slab, something like that to get up a little bit. But it was more or less to get the railing and the decking away from the building and go with like a concrete sidewalk around it, low maintenance.
I see. Anyone else have questions?
If I have questions, I guess I was one that wasn't in favor of keeping Building C, the previous cost estimates, due to the risks going forward on the investment, and these numbers, these options don't include the restoration costs. So these numbers are even worse now than where we were as far as the estimates went initially, and it looks like the cost to build out a new building would be $112,000, or $112,000, and we'd have about $8,000 of demolition costs, which is right around what some of these estimates would be, not even including restoration. And so I just don't see the financial benefit at this point. I think it's best to demolish at this point Building C and include it in the area of community engagement, envisioning that we're looking at with the other buildings going forward.
It is 7:30 at this point, and so we need to move on to our regular session, but we can resume this conversation. We can resume this conversation at the appropriate time in our regular agenda, which would be after the approval of consent agendas and call to the audience. We can continue this work session and talk about this some more. And then we can talk about if we want to do anything else with this item tonight, other than take it for information. So, all right, thanks, don't go away. At this point, I'm going to adjourn our special work session, and we'll move directly into our regular city council meeting for March 2nd, 2020. Lindsay, could you call the roll?
Dora?
Here.
Cummins?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Manetza?
Here. Our invocation this evening is by Reverend Jared Kramer. Please rise and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, bless the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to all peoples of the earth. To the president and members of the cabinet, to governors of states, mayors of cities, and all those in administrative authority, grant wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. To senators and representatives, and to those who make our laws in states, cities, and towns, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people and to fulfill our obligations to our community. Through the judges and officers of our courts, give understanding and integrity, that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. And teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that we may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society, that we may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. And Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we ask that you will send down upon those who hold office in this city of Grand Haven the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have call to the viewing audience. If you're online watching on stream, you can go to grandhaven.org and scroll to Agenda tab at the bottom of the home page and see our complete packet for tonight's meeting. All right, we have presentations.
Yes, Your Honor. Oh, I'm sorry.
That was just a call for viewing. For the
Oh,
people-
this isn't the
people at
opening
home.
comments?
No, not yet. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. First, we have, there's an extra item that appeared
I don't
recently.
come very often.
Okay, no, we'll get to you in a minute.
Okay.
But first, we have, there was a call to the viewing audience for people who are seeing us online rather than here. And I think in the future, I'll probably not read that one out loud. It's just there. But first, our next item would be appointments to boards and commissions. We have none. Now we have presentations. A presentation to Lee Adams and Nicole Hudson for promotions.
Chief Hawk?
Chief Hawk?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Jeff Hawk, Director of Public Safety. Have some newly minted promotions to present to you tonight. And I want to start by reading a little bit about each officer that was promoted and go through that real quick. First, we have Lieutenant Lee Adams. Lieutenant Lee Adams began his career with the Grand Haven Department of Public Safety as a public safety officer in December of 2004 after serving in the United States Marine Corps. He attended the Ottawa County Fire Academy and also received his medical first responder license in 2005. He has served as a field training officer, code enforcement officer, and undercover detective with the West Michigan Enforcement Team. Lee was promoted to sergeant in May of 2013 and also instructs police recruits as an adjunct professor at Grand Valley State University Police Academy and in the Criminal Justice Department at GVSU. Lieutenant Adams commands the Department Honor Guard and has taken leadership for projects such as the Scott Flahive Public Safety Officer Memorial and Grand Haven Beach Safety Area Sign Project. So I present to you Lieutenant Lee Adams. Next, we have Sergeant Nicole Hudson. Sergeant Hudson started her career with the Grand Haven Department of Public Safety on December 2nd, 2002, when she was hired as a cadet. She served as cadet from 2002 to 2006, when she was promoted to records clerk from 2006 to 2007. During 2006, she completed the Ottawa County Fire Academy and Medical First Responder course and also served as a part-time firefighter. She attended the Grand Valley State University Police Academy in 2007 and was hired as a public safety officer in January of 2008. Sergeant Hudson has served the department as an undercover detective with the West Michigan Enforcement Team, school resource officer, physical control tactics instructor, taser instructor, CPR instructor, field training officer, and member of the Honor Guard. Nicole also teaches police recruits at Grand Rapids Community College and Grand Valley State University Police Academies. Sergeant Nicole Hudson.
Speeches?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much,
Congratulations.
and congratulations. Next, we have 2020-2021 fiscal year council goals.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Each year, we spend a lot of time together going over the goals and prioritizing those goals, and then Mary Angel in the city manager's office spends a lot of time putting together a graphic presentation that is then enjoyed by all departments throughout the year, so we can at a glance look up and recall what the path the city council set forward to us. Each year, the city council sets broad goals to provide an active and positive framework for the city organization. In 2020, the list will require a high level of coordinated teamwork, much like a chain of helpful volunteers setting sandbags to hold back floodwaters. Council leads by example, and in 2020, they have set an ambitious course.
And there we are.
That's true.
And so that will be put up on the various walls in the different departments of the city. I'll put it up on the overhead screen so we can...
Isn't that, there you go.
Kind of blurry like the rest of us, huh?
Yeah. I've seen worse pictures
Yeah, just
Bob.
today.
today.
Yeah.
All right, and would
There you
you,
go, that'll be up all year, and I think the different goals, people can read them for themselves, they'll go up on the website, it will be in the budget.
okay,
And we hope to attain, we did a pretty good job on the 2019-20 goals. I'll be reporting out on that. For the most part, we stayed true, and I think this year we'll be able to take care of an awful lot of those items as well.
all right, well, as you can see from our goals here, we have, many of our goals here have to do with either high water, snow melt energy, or that sort of thing, and so we have plenty to do this year. Hopefully we'll make a good dent in it. And every year we have carryover from years before, so sometimes it's the never-ending story. But you gotta start somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
That's all I
will
have
this
on
at some point be on our agenda to approve these goals formally?
there. You already did. Those
Oh.
were voted on in early January, I think, and so this is
Okay.
just the graphic representation. And I'll hand you each a copy so you can read the final print.
so we
okay.
all have a picture of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you mention who the artist was that did this fine work?
Gentleman named David Cummings,
Any relation?
he's the brother of my wife.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, okay.
Very good.
Brother-in-law.
Tell him thank you very much.
He did a nice job, thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right. Anything else on goals?
No, sir.
All right, and then we'll have these on our website so everybody else can enjoy them as much as we do. Thank you. All right, next, we have approval of consent and regular agendas. Do we have any changes?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Perhaps after the, wrapping up the work session, we might want to talk about one of the consent agenda items. But other than that, I did not have any changes.
Okay. Anybody else? Changes on
No,
agendas? Could use a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Fritz, second by Scott to approve consent and regular agendas.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Lenexa.
Yes. Okay, now, young lady, it's time for our call to the audience. So, somebody's ahead of you. So, let me read this. At this time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing the council will come to the podium, speak directly to the mayor, must identify themselves by name and address, and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. So please come forward.
My name is Peggy Clevinga. I live at 1308 Fulton Street here in Grand Haven. My concerns have been about having the nativity scene and the cross taken off of Dewey Hill. I contacted a Christian attorney in Washington, D.C. His name is Jay Sekulow. He's with the American Center for Law and Justice. I have a memorandum here. It's quite large. I can't afford to copy it for all of you, so I'll just give it to...
If you give it to Linda, she'll make sure we all get a copy.
Okay. That nativity scene and the cross can go back up. It is legal to have it up. I'm sorry that the people who came here, and I guess they have moved from the community since then, only came here to try to get the city council in a lawsuit to get some money. I don't think they work a regular job. I've heard they've traveled around the United States in different places and trying to just get money from everybody. And I have many samples here. And I just heard recently in Florida that a judge allowed it okay to have a cross on public property because there was some kind of a suit against it. So I have read this over, and I know that the people that paid to put it up and to keep it up, the city didn't do it. So the city hasn't lost any money out of it. It is stored in the museum where Steckadies used to be, is what my understanding is. It's still available. And I do think that we have every right, because I don't believe we're a Christian nation anymore, but we're still a Christian nation, considered that. And it is legal, it is permissible to have the nativity scene and the cross back up on Dewey Hill. And I will present this to your gal. She can do what she needs to do with it. And I just wanted to see that freedom of Christian religious expression still allowed to happen. And I've been very concerned about it. I've been so concerned about it that I have talked to several people, and they said that if the city council wants to be hard-nosed about it and not look into it, I am prepared to get petitions signed. I do not know how many I will have to have signed, but people do want the nativity scene and the cross back up, and we have every right to have it up. Okay? Short and sweet.
Okay. Well, thank you. And leave your papers with Linda.
First, I would like to say that
First, tell us
I would
your
like,
name.
oh, yeah, geez. Anybody doesn't know me? Anyway, My name is Dale Fry, and I live on, at 1014 Columbus. So I would like to thank His Honor the Mayor for writing a good article about the power plant. There were some facts in there, not a lot, but a couple of those facts I didn't even know, and I try to keep current. What I would like to suggest is that we look at the possibility of using the snow melt one more season. I don't know what part of the building it's in, but it would be nice if it was in a corner or someplace like that. And then if you take the building down, you take some of the other material and you just finish off that section so that, you know, it's closed in and you use the stuff that's there. Now, some people said it wasn't very efficient, but there's things that can be done. I imagine it's a steam boiler because you don't really want to boil antifreeze. And so if it's a steam boiler, then there's a steam to antifreeze heat converter, you know, heat exchanger. And you can increase the rate of fluid flow and stuff like that. You can make things more efficient. Whether you can on that one, I don't know. I don't know how big it is. Is it a 480 three-phase motor or is it a 4,000 volt motor? But whatever it is, it's got a starter and it's got all that crap there. They may not be real close, so you may want to move them closer, you know, cut the cables, move it closer, splice them in. That is not so hard. You've got a lot of people who are retiring, just, you know, give a guy another month or two of work. So that's the thing to consider. And the reason I would consider that is because I know how things move around here and I know how they move so far. And I would not look forward to any melting if you, very soon, if you take that system out, because just look at the way things have been running. Also, I don't think you should use any waste heat from any reciprocating plant and think you're going to save any money, because guess what? You need snow melt in the winter. And in the winter, you don't run the reciprocating plant because there's no load. Everybody is left. And so, and there's no air conditioning. So consider that. Another thing to consider is you're going to blow up the plant and you're going to blow up the smokestack. Go ahead and blow up the plant, although I think you should save as much constructively as you can. But don't blow up the smokestack. Why? Because when you come in, just think of this. You come in from Spring Lake, what do you see? Well, you see the top of the courthouse and the top of the smokestack. What does that mean? It means if you're a cell phone signal, where do you want to start? You want to start at the top of the smokestack. Who's putting in a system that's cell phone related? Think. Maybe the electric company. Yes, you're going to have cell phones in every meter. And you have a tower, and it's already built. And it probably would mean no relays, just tower to meters. You can investigate that. But, you know, that's something you can look at. The other thing is, if you put 3 rings of walkway around the top of the tower to your ladder, and put the ladder inside, of course, you can rent one to Verizon, use one for your meters, and still have one left when 5G comes here, if it does.
Okay.
So, something to think about.
Dale, you'll have to wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
So, I'm saying, just try to be, look around and see if you can do something more innovative. And if you can't, you can't. So what? Doesn't hurt to look.
Okay. Thank you.
All right? Thank you for your work, gentlemen.
Who's next? Field?
Mayor Manetza and members of the council, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other Board of Light and Power issues this evening. And I appreciate the fact that you're holding this meeting. Before I start, I want to say up front that I'm not opposed to the plans that have been presented by the Board of Light and Power management. I want to compliment them. Clearly, a lot of work has been done, put into their studies, and there's been some very creative initiatives. One thing I really like is the idea of recycling the diesel plant on Harbor Avenue into perhaps condominiums or something. Your decision on the future of power production in this community is the most important one faced in Grand Haven since the Sims plant was built in the 70s. I urge you to base your decision on 3 factors to determine the best economic value for the ratepayers and taxpayers of the city, to make a decision reflecting responsible environmental stewardship, and to find the best use for some of our city's most valuable land, the developed parts of Harbor Island. Though I applaud their work, my concern is that the BLP efforts have been aimed at the technology of now, not the technology of the future, energy technology which is rapidly changing. Others recognize this change. We need only consider the announcement of Consumers Power last week of their plans to be carbon neutral by 2040. I'm not an expert, but with the challenge of determining our energy future here, I think we should be cautious and deliberate. There's been a tradition in Grand Haven for big challenges to form advisory committees to look at different solutions. We just formed one to look at Chinook Pier. I was chairman of the committee that looked at the original redevelopment of the Grand Trunk Railroad site. There were citizens committees that looked at all kinds of things. You've been presented with one solution for energy production by the BLP. As with a big medical decision, second opinions are worthwhile. A group of capable citizens should be asked to study options and return to the council in an appropriate amount of time. There will likely be need to hire some consultants, an expense which will help us avoid mistakes. Here's some of the issues this committee should be looking at, some of them. I'm sure there are more. The need for a gas plant to be used 10 to 20% of the time. The cost of a gas plant. If bonds are sold at the full $75 million, which are requested, it'll be $7,500 per resident of the city, or $37,500 for a family of 5, plus the interest. The cost of maintaining a staff available 24/7 standby operation of the plant if it's going to be used 10 to 20% of the time. The future of gas prices. Projected costs for continuing to buy off the grid in the coming decades. Changes in prices of renewable energy. Solar is now cheaper than coal, for example. Advances in energy storage, which could be coupled with renewable production. Got other things to say, but the one thing I would say is I've given you some information on paper. I have other points here. My one more comment is there $20 million in the Board of Light and Power's cash fund right now. Some of that money could be used for the demolition while a citizens committee takes a look at the real issues that we're facing. We need a second look. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm Mike Weaver, 637 Lake Avenue. This is in regards to Chinook Pier. Read the report that was presented to you today and a little concerned about the quality of it. Quite frankly, when it's stating, and this is for everybody to read and believe, is that Building C was saturated, which that's really a hard thing to do with wood unless it's fully rotted, but it appears that report's wrong. So I'd like to have you step back a little bit on that one. And also building costs at 110 seems a little light right now in today's environment. I think costs are, based when I talk to builders, are minimum of 150 per square foot. So keep that in mind. But I guess the biggest thing is all these solutions that have been brought up and looked at, not one of them talks about just raising the buildings up a few feet. That's generally when you're in high water, and if it's an option, you look at it. And I would encourage you to at least, before you bring in the wrecking balls, cranes, whatever they're going to use, but I think it would be worth, we have two great house moving companies, and they don't just move houses, they jack them up, and then they move them if needed. But many times, and I participated in a house that was raised on Spring Lake many years ago in the 80s, worked great, it wasn't that tough, especially when you have a situation where you have crawls. It's actually a good thing to have when you're raising buildings. So I guess I know you're really in a hurry to bulldoze these babies. It's like a $50,000 bill, but you're bulldozing buildings that we have $1.5 million into. And I think your haste makes waste, and I think that's what you might be doing in this case. So anyways, I would like you to hold off at least 2 weeks before you authorize the demolition. I'd like you to get a updated report, because this is not correct. And I'd like you to contact a couple of local movers and just say, what can we do? I know you've talked to people, but have you talked to the right ones yet? So thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Kent Blome. I live at 1820 Pine Court. My interest is kind of the same as Fields. It's about the BLP intent to bond issue. I have a brother who lives on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. They use a combination of wind, hydro, and solar to meet some of their energy needs for 100,000 year-round residents. Hawaii has a goal to meet its 100% renewable energy goal by 2045, but Kauai has moved faster than that. They invest in utility-scale battery storage systems at 2 sites on the island. The storage systems contribute significantly to grid stability. Kauai is expected to meet 70% alternative energy capacity by 2023. Now, I know it's not fair to compare Kauai to Grand Haven. They obviously have more sun than us, but my point is that they use a Tesla PowerPack battery storage system. The battery packs will store any type of energy, not just renewable, traditional fossil fuels, or clean energy sources. We have technology now to do this, and over the next 5, 10, or 15 years, it's only going to become better in terms of efficiency and cost effectiveness. The PowerPack system is site-specifically designed, so you can design it for large scale, small scale, peak hours, things like that. For the people in this room who were in high school in the 60s, 70s, and most of the 80s, I don't think any of us imagined this small thing that we carry around with us or wear on our wrist. It works as a phone, a camera, a newspaper, map, mail system, and an up-to-date encyclopedia. Not to mention all those games people play on their phones now. But someone imagined it, someone had the vision, and a bunch of really smart people worked it to create and continuously improve it. So that's what's happening with this technology in the world of clean energy technology. It's only going to get better and more cost-effective for customers. I'd like to end with a quote from a hero of mine. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Consider this. I know that sometimes people here think, we're so small, what difference could it make how we generate power or get our power? Well, that small step we take as a city in the near future can have a giant leap forward for the health, welfare of our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sophie Stopker. My address is 54 Crescent Hill. Mayor and members of the City Council, I have been a resident of Grand Haven for over 10 years, and I'm so lucky to be able to say that. My parents still live here, and family and friends continue to visit because of their love for our small town. My family, alongside friends and neighbors, have admired Grand Haven's commitment to move beyond coal and their retirement of the Sims plant. However, now that a plan has been put forward to replace one fossil fuel plant with another, we are pretty disappointed. And this disappointment spans beyond my family and close friends and other residents of Grand Haven. Through 3 different surveys, people of Grand Haven have pointed out time and time again that they are ready to adapt a cleaner approach to energy. In fact, a survey conducted by the Board of Light and Power through the Great Blue Research Project found that well over 1/2 of both residential and commercial respondents noted it is important to replace Sims with some local generation. Over 2/5 of respondents were not willing to pay any additional amount for a local natural gas plant. Additionally, through a survey conducted by a local Grand Haven resident, it was found that 69% responded that they prefer Grand Haven to acquire energy only from diverse outside sources, including wind and solar. Finally, in a poll released by the Grand Haven Tribune that asked, "Are you happy, sad, or fearful that the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power shut down its coal-fired power plant. 67% responded that they are happy for the environment. As you can see, the people of Grand Haven have spoken. If you are as interested in what the will of the people want as you say you are, then you will listen to us when we say that it is time to abandon fossil fuels once and for all and create a path towards a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hello, Josh Bruger, 626 Slayton Avenue. Here to speak regarding the BLP, and I think like I said last week regarding marijuana, 180 seconds is nowhere near enough time, especially with this issue. I have the unique position of having been on the inside of a lot of discussions and the build up to this decision to vote for a pre-approval, I'm going to call it, for a $75 million bond. One of the key conversations I had with the leadership at the BLP, with Dave and Jack Spant, took place after the primary this past summer. It was a 4-hour closed-door meeting, partially because I had to leave to take my son to a dentist appointment. But at any rate, during that conversation, I asked what I thought was one very key question of Dave and Jack, and that was, if we build a power plant of any shape or size and the grid goes down, what happens to the city of Grand Haven's power? The answer was, Grand Haven's power goes down. We are so interconnected to the grid that even building a power plant, Dave will tell you, and I'm glad he said this at the last meeting you guys had, that building a power plant will provide no additional security for the city of Grand Haven residents. Once that's established, as it has been, the next step is to determine if it's a financially viable plan to build a power plant of any shape or size. You don't need pre-approval on a $75 million bond to determine if it's financially viable to build anything at all. The BLP has had well over a year to run the numbers. On Sunday, I sat down using information that was provided to me by the BLP through numerous conversations to take a look at what the projected loss might be if we were to build a power plant. I started at $75 million because that was the number that Dave and I, through many discussions, determined, and he will verify this, that that's not a good amount to use to build. It's going to be a loss. I used the same data to calculate the next step down, which was a $60 million, 22.5 megawatt facility. When compared to not generating power, if capacity rates, and this is the key thing because this is based on capacity, stay the same, we will lose $48 million over a 25-year period. It's a very conservative number. Dave will tell you that, frankly, Josh doesn't know what he's talking about. I will say, frankly, that I've had a lot of time to look at this, numerous conversations with Dave, and it doesn't make financial sense. Let's assume rates double. We'll lose $24 million versus building nothing. Let's assume rates triple. We'll lose over $1 million. It does improve as the rates go up, but at no point do we break even. It doesn't take approval for a $75 million bond to determine that. The BLP needs some money to demo the plant, to build a substation monitoring system out there to take care of our water, but they don't need pre-approval for that. It's been compared to a mortgage pre-approval. It's not a mortgage pre-approval. It's a business loan pre-approval. And when you can't provide a business financial plan that makes sense, it shouldn't be approved, not even pre-approved. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Leslie Newman. I live at 111 West Ann Street in Spring Lake. The interest I have in Harbor Island is as the president of Wetland Watch, which is a grassroots organization that came to you about 10 years ago to talk about removing Phragmites from the ponds in Harbor Island. Harbor Island has become, except for the high water, a beautiful place to walk, bike, and enjoy. I also am a friend of Roz Mayberry, who 20 years ago completed 3 years' work of making sure that Grand Haven was a good steward of Harbor Island and keeping it in as natural state as possible. I would like to see the industrial zone that BLP owns limited to return to whatever classification lets it be public area once it's cleaned up. I would like to see Harbor Island be the one place that is not developed residentially and lets children in our community have a sense of what this area looked like before moneyed interests came in and took over what is a beautiful place. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Walter Davis, 209 South 3rd Street. You've heard many things about the practical issues. I want to address the moral issue. As Reverend Kramer reminded us, we're a moral community. That means that when we go to work, we don't leave our morals at home. And if we know that something we're doing is going to do harm both to our community and our planet as moral beings, we do all we can to stop that. Now, the Lord moves in mysterious ways, as I'll illustrate shortly. You might all take a reading of Revelation 11:18. If we get the two companies that we relied on for advice, MISO and Burns McDowell, have deep ties to the fossil fuel industry. MISO gave us an absolutely fallacious report saying that natural fracking had been perfected. Burns and McDowell said, get all of your energy from the grid. Don't take the option of building a power plant. The facts, and I've made copies of this document for all 5 of you. It's 4 pages of facts of what fracking is doing in the communities where it's taking place. It's facts about the cancers, the child leukemias, the blood disorders. It's facts about all the chemicals that are being pumped into the water with the fracking. It's evidence about the earthquakes that are going on there. It's evidence after evidence that fracking is a crime against the planet. Now that's known, and if you stick with people who are on the grid, they at least know these matters. And they are starting to think about developing ways to get us to complete renewables. I have talked to several of you, and I know that you possess a far from adequate knowledge about fracking. That's why I've prepared 5 copies of this. This is required reading for you, because you have to remember something. You're not private citizens. You are elected. You are representatives. You are responsible in this matter. You cannot be acting in inadequate knowledge. In the religious tradition I was brought up in, there was a distinction between vincible and invincible ignorance. Invincible ignorance was the kind where you couldn't possibly find out the truth about a matter, and therefore you were not guilty. Vincible ignorance was when you could find out, when the evidence was there and you chose not to get it. And in that case, you were guilty. This is one way for you to catch up. There's one other. I said the Lord moves in mysterious ways. On Wednesday night, in Loudet, Room A at 6:30, there's going to be a showing of the film Gasland. That film will show you enough about fracking that you will begin to know what that matter is. I invite all of you to attend. I require you 5 to attend.
Thank you. And if you would like to give your, give it to Linda, and she'll make sure we all get it.
You be sure to give it to them, Linda.
She is very good at that.
Will there be a test afterwards? I just want to prepare.
Okay. Thank you, Walter.
No, no.
Yeah, quiz or something.
Who's next? You didn't all come here just to watch.
Maybe some of them did, you know.
Jerry McCaleb, 1235 Slayton. And since you figured there was more people waiting. I wasn't gonna come tonight, because I figured the medical marijuana thing was kind of a done deal. But since there's one more vote to be taken, it's one more opportunity to say, please don't open the door at Grand Haven for this. You say there's 56% of the people voted for it, 56% of less than 20% of the voters of the city. To me, that's not a majority, but that's what you hang your hat on, is the people voted for it. The thing that I regret the most is that, as the gentleman was just saying about facts, and I don't think that the city council, I think everything's been done very clinically as to zoning issues and all of that. But very little has been done to address the medical issues, the damage to young people, the developing brains, and what we're opening the door to as we open the door with the medical marijuana facilities. And if that's what you need to get yourself through the day, more power to you, but you're getting it somewhere else today, and you can get it that same somewhere else tomorrow. But for the city of Grand Haven to open the door for that, I think is it's going to be a sad day, because I think there's going to be regrets to be seen. Because as the more I hear, the more I read about the medical implications that nobody knows about or that are beginning to be learned on the developing brain, is a really dangerous thing. And I wonder where the people are from the schools, the teachers that care about their students. And I wonder about where the rest of the churches are that are supposed to be teaching their people about these moral issues that we're talking about. Marijuana, medical marijuana, is just a clinical issue. It speaks as we open the doors to all these things, because after medical is going to become the pressure to recreational, as we see Grand Rapids is dealing with this right now, and they're on all sides of the issue. That these are big things, and it speaks to a very permissive society that says yes to everything. And I think it's a very dangerous trend. And I would ask that the city council reconsider. And I know it's late in the day, and I'm guessing that it's not going to happen. But if I don't say it, then I'll be guilty of myself of keeping my mouth shut, and I don't think that that's right. So thank you very much for listening. And it's been an interesting meeting. Last week it was the parking people. This week it's the BLP people. But hey, it's a good thing that everybody's involved.
That's what I like. Thank you, Jerry.
Jen Steppe, 16200 Harbor Point Drive. I'm also late to the party on the medical marijuana stuff. I'm not a doctor, but I have some experience with marijuana. I grew up in Detroit, moved here in '98 when I was 21 years old. My father was a drug dealer. I used to go on his drug runs with him, selling marijuana. I got older, lived through drug culture, became a deadhead. I followed the Grateful Dead around, smoked a lot of pot, married somebody who smoked pot, moved here. I thought you guys were so lame because everybody was so anti-drugs here and anti-marijuana. I ended up having kids. My ex-husband smoked a lot of pot, ended up getting in a lot of trouble, got into heroin, left me to raise 2 children, and I grew to just really appreciate this area and the wisdom that people here have for being so lame and for being protective of us for doing the right thing. So here we are 22 years later. I've got 2 12-year-olds at White Pines. Recently, a child brought in pot brownies on the bus, offering them to students because of they didn't tell anybody. I called the vice principal and he told me about it when I questioned him. The availability of it, having a store here that sells marijuana is just heartbreaking. I would have thought it was really cool when I was 21. I'm a little older and wiser now. I think it's a really bad idea. I don't know if it's too late to state that, but my prayer and my hope is that you just have wisdom and make the right decision and don't try to be cool. I know this is like the thing of the day, but I would just ask that you keep it out of Grand Haven. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Andrea Hendrick, 1514 Penoyer, resident of Grand Haven since 2003. I'm here just to speak about the power plant. Obviously, I have an interest in land use, and I'm a planner, I'm an environmental planner, and I am afraid that we are moving forward in a path that's not looking at all of the factors that we could be looking at for that space. As a planner, I'm afraid that we're gambling $75 million plus interest on technology that could potentially be outdated in the time that it's going to take us to make up that money in 20, 30, 50 years. I'm thankful for everyone that was involved in the development of the Sims plant. I think that there is such a strong community here. I think that there was innovation then. There was a community that stepped up and made good decisions. But I'm afraid that we're not looking at all of the factors for this. And I guess as a 35-year-old, wait, I'm 36 now, 36-year-old woman with children, and my daughter wanted to be here and she wanted to speak and she wanted to express her concerns about what we're doing. I am just hoping that we can give this generation, our generation, the chance to open this up to a full board. The BLP's done a good job. There's been a lot of research, but right now we're not working off of their first, we're not making choices off of their first recommendation. I am just asking that we would hold off for a minute, give us some time to look at this, open this up. I think that we're not a crazy, like, left-wing, right-wing city. I think that there is a lot of very intelligent people in this city. I am so impressed with the way that you have handled what's going on at Chinook Pier and the way that we came together to really come up with a good plan for our future, and I wish that we could do the same there. So again, I'm asking, let's just look at technology. Petoskey just passed a resolution to go 100%, to utilize renewable energy 100% by 2035. Traverse City brought in one of the top minds in renewable energy out of Burlington, Vermont. Vermont has done an amazing job with renewables, and they have set policy and have opened things up for communication regarding the best way to develop renewable energy. Traverse City just brought them in. I think, again, we've done a good job. I think we can do better. I really think that if we were to open this conversation up to a board, that the collective knowledge, the energy, the education in this city, we could have a much better impact on the decision that happens there. Not saying this is the wrong choice. I'm just saying that there's potential that there's a better choice, and I think that we should be able to look at that as a community. This is a huge decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jen Greenlee, and I live at 16731 Ashley Lane. I'd like to know, with a show of hands, how many here use marijuana?
Ma'am, please address the council.
And how many here use medical marijuana with a medical script? I do believe that it is not too late to still say no to medical marijuana dispensaries here. I came from Colorado, and I still communicate with people from Colorado. In my town of Colorado, they still do not have medical marijuana dispensaries, but medical marijuana is still obtainable. There's been quite a change in my community because people are coming in with bloodshot eyes into the stores. The kids are lower achievers. There are suicides. There's an increase in crime rate. There's been an increase in car accidents. Statistics are showing that there's a 151% increase in deaths. And in the state of Washington, which is a different state because it's also a state that's legalized it, they've doubled it. 1 out of 5 car crashes, fatal ones, are because of marijuana. Yes, somebody was already saying, we want to be moral, we want to promote positive moral. And in our community, are we really concerned about our next generation whose developing brains are affected the most? 8% of IQ points is what they lose when they start marijuana young. The medical marijuana fraud increases greatly when it's allowed. We know good and well if we have medical marijuana, which we don't really need to have, people can get it. And you can get CBD oil and CBD products from the health food store for the CBD part that may be beneficial, but there have not been enough clinical trials to prove it because they haven't had enough placebos to be effective because too many people have been users already, so then that makes the trials be flawed. But in terms of our kids, do we really want to raise a generation that will be low achievers, poor motivators, their brains will be poor about functioning properly and poor problem solving, they'll have an increase in anxiety and in panic attacks and paranoias? We already know from previous history in the 60s and 70s the results of what marijuana does. Now we're talking about THC that is like 20 times more intense than the 60s and the 70s. Most of you do not take that kind of intensity, but kids don't know better. There's a lot of kids that are getting into vaping. We know that's very common, and they are being affected, and there's lots of hospitalizations that have increased. So I ask you to, again, to consider voting no, because we don't want our community to go that way. I came here falling in love with this beach town, and I'd hate to see it become what it doesn't need to be if we want to remain moral and positive in helping to promote the betterment of our community for the sake of the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patty Nelson, and I live at 1820 Pine Court. And I'm still trying to reconcile the picture I saw in the paper of Bob Manetza.
Oh, please.
Doesn't seem like the same person, but
that's my better half.
I don't know, you look pretty good right now. So I understand that there's going to be an intent to issue the bond, and it's also my understanding that the language for the bond isn't known yet. Is that correct? That we don't know, that may or may not be a gas power plant built?
Well, in our agenda item, if you read it, the intent to issue bonds has a list of things associated with it. There's not a lot of detail there, but it's an intent for borrowing money.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's pretty much what the intent statement says.
Okay. So we don't know what the ultimate language will be, and I would say that I realize some of that money will be used for the demolition and remediation of Harbor Island, and I think that's a good thing and a necessary thing. But as a taxpayer in the city and a ratepayer to BLP, if it does end up including language for a gas power plant, I would not be in favor of that. As Andrea mentioned, there are towns like Traverse City and Petoskey that are working on renewable energy. And of course, there's towns and cities all over Michigan that are doing that as well. Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Detroit. I realize we're smaller than that, but I still think it's important that we consider renewable energy. And I just hope that you all have the vision to consider what the future is. That people have mentioned the technology is changing significantly. I know in your article you said that clean energy is intermittent, but because of that, those battery storage packs, they are not just intermittent. They can store that energy. My daughter works for the solar division of Tesla, and they're really doing some amazing things. So I just hope you all keep that in mind, that the potential is there, not only for Grand Haven to have green energy for peak capacity, but also potentially even for some independence. So thank you.
Thank you.
Reverend Dr. Jared Kramer, 11571 Oak Grove Road, and capable of not being contrarian. Just I'd like to commend the City Council for the hard work that you've done on the medical marijuana issue. I know it's a difficult question. It's one that's divisive for a lot of people.
I do believe that you've looked at it carefully, and I'm grateful for that. I'd like to reiterate to the council and Your Honor some of the stuff I said when I spoke on this last week, and that is that according to New England Journal of Medicine, 69% of medical doctors believe marijuana can help with conditions. 67% said it should be a medical option for patients. You may be curious, what are the sort of conditions that this is used to treat by doctors? These are people with Alzheimer's, with ALS, HIV/AIDS, cancer, Crohn's disease, epilepsy, seizures, glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, muscle spasms, severe and chronic pain, severe nausea, and telling people who are suffering with those conditions that they should drive farther away to get a legal drug that is prescribed by their doctor does seem to me to be a cruel thing to do to them. But also just acknowledging as well, like I said last time, the clear statistics that of those who use medical marijuana, over half of them are over 50. The average age of someone's about 41. So this is not something that's having a massive impact upon a bunch of young kids running around high. That's just not borne out by the research or the statistics at all. So thank you for the work you've done on it. I applaud what's moving forward. I think it makes sense. I think it's in line with the science, it's in line with the current laws, and it's in line with medical practice, and I'm very glad to see that you're doing it.
Thank you.
Hello there. My name is Rebecca Neal, 1644 Franklin Avenue. I'm going to speak to the medical marijuana issue just because I figured this is something I feel very passionately about. I want to reiterate that this is a medical use ordinance. I think it's really unfair for any individual to have to put out there what they use for medication. I would never expect you or anyone else to explain why you use heart medication and or cancer medication, but recognize that neurological disorders are something that are highly prevalent among our community and people in the United States. 1/3 of medications for epilepsy is not even relevant. It's not feasible, it doesn't work, which is why I'm a consumer. It is relevant to my needs. My overall quality of life has improved since I have been a cannabis consumer. There is patented anti-inflammatory benefits that come from this medication that the government holds, which is why we have gotten as far as we have based on these laws. To consider any more research on this subject, we need to influence these laws, which is what you guys have done, and I am so very thankful for that. The only way we can move forward with gaining research that we need to know, based on the United States, all the research thus far has been done based on the adversities of this medication. Let's consider how these laws are going to find the benefits that do come from this. We have plenty of other countries that have done phenomenal work, which is pretty much how we've gotten to where we are. I just want you to recognize that what you are doing is influencing laws that have been negated for over 87 years. We've seen the repercussions of bad drug laws. I'm asking for this community to understand that if we implement a regulatory use, this is taking away from the black market, this is taking away from our children, and this is giving the accessibility to people that need it. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your time putting into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Andy Cawthon, 50 Howard, Grand Haven. And I have to compliment Mayor Manetza on his article in today's Tribune stating out the case for the notice of bond by BLP for a bond issue, reinforcing BLP's staff reports. This is a financial consideration to protect the cash in BLP's cash account by allowing them to expense the expenses of demolition and remediation of Harbor Island. It is not a decision about a technology that might or might not get built on the island. It's basically a financial consideration that allows BLP to preserve cash, which is a smart financial move. I hope that you can find it in your will to approve the notice of bond. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no one else, we'll move on with our agenda, so last chance. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting for another call to the audience. So at this point, I want to resume the work session. We were talking about the condition of Building C and what we were going to do with it. Actually, you made a presentation. Derek was up here. I see he's still in the house.
Yes.
We were questioning the condition of the building.
Yes, and I would like to just clarify a point during the work session. The reference to elevated moisture in the crawl space, subfloor, and floor joists, that was identified in the Fishbeck report, and I just have a draft of that report, so I didn't include it in the packet quite yet. But that is they recommend removal of anything that measures above 20% moisture saturation.
And they measured it at what?
It's about 23%.
Okay. And that's in the joists and subfloor?
Correct. The drywall was much higher.
Okay. Anyone have questions, further questions on condition of Building C?
Well, I guess I'll ask the question here. I mean, is the staff looking for what we'd like to do going forward? What option we're looking at, or are we, or obviously we have a demolition agenda item tonight that could be amended to add this building if this body desires that.
Correct. The additional cost would be $8,000 to demolish the building. Time's
Your
up.
time's up.
Time's
Pat.
up, Pat.
There you go.
So the additional cost would be $8,000. Now, the discussion that Ashley's had, and she's passed along to me and Derek as well, is talking with our own facilities staff, DPW staff, who work quite a bit with these buildings and are quite familiar with the circumstances, and our two different engineering firms with architects, Fishbeck and Abbenmarsh, and no fewer than 8 different contractors. That have come to us and presented and shared their expert opinion about what the costs would be, and looking at square footages that we get, not off the internet or from the back of our hand. We ask local contractors what current costs are, and we ask local engineers and architects what current costs are. So these are not, half guesses or anything. These are well-researched opinions. That in the most conservative sense, the least we could possibly imagine paying to have Building C restored and remediated would certainly be in excess of $150,000. And we're thinking probably more. I guess I could ask Derek and Ashley if they thought it might be more than that, or if that's about what they're thinking.
Yeah, I would conservatively budget 200,000, which, at that point doesn't make it economically feasible, but if it's something that the council wanted to direct, and they wanted that building there, and, it's definitely doable. It just isn't economically feasible.
Well, you can do anything if you put resources into it. That's something I
true.
learned years ago. Not always worth doing, but you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Did you give thought to other measures such as raising the building, that sort of thing?
Yeah, raising the building, again, creates those challenges of, steps and stairways and railings and all that. And you can make them out of concrete, we make them out of steel, just adds cost. And so...
Well, you'd have to have ADA access.
Yeah.
The higher you go, the more difficult it would be to get in them.
Yep.
Unless you raised all the grade.
Right. We have, the grade down there is, it's a beautiful park area, and so, works if we can just get the water to lower a little bit, which is what caused this problem to begin with. So.
And I spent the first phase, just like with any grieving process, I was in denial. And I tried to ask every question and come up with any way possible. Well, couldn't you do this? Couldn't you do that? Couldn't you raise the buildings? Can't you do that? And when you just look at the dollars is where it falls short. Yes, we could, like Bob said, we could do those things, but you're going to end up with a 40-year-old building that you've spent more than what it would cost to build a brand-new building. So is that just what you would do with your own property? Would that be what you do with your business? And I don't think it is. You know, I don't know that it's fiscally a good idea to try to do that. We would spend much more money than what it would cost to simply tear them down and rebuild exactly what's there. So wouldn't you rather do that and end up with new construction? And I think the answer would be yes. But as long as we're going to that length, why not embark on a complete reimagining of the whole property and look at what the community would really like to see there?
Well, when this came up previously, of course, the numbers have changed since, and costs have all gone up. But originally, we had figures of clearing something on the order of 12 grand a year in rent. And the cost of carrying that $100,000 for 15 years, I think you had pegged it around $9,500 to $10,000 or so. So we were still on the plus side of that equation. And clearly, we've crossed that line.
Clearly.
So I guess that whether I don't know, is there anybody still, there was 3 of us last time interested in saving this building.
I was one of the 3 that was, had an interest in preserving the building based upon the previous numbers that we had come up with. In light of what has been presented to us with some further investigation, I can't hardly see a way that I can still do that. So I probably am gonna have to side with Denny on this one and side with having it taken down.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, the costs have gone up considerably on it. But there was brought up at the Brownfield today, a possibility of capturing some kind of money through the Brownfield. Before we tear them down, we have to do some due diligence beforehand so we can actually capture that. So if the vote comes down that we're gonna tear it down, we're not gonna remove that all down, so we can't capture anything backwards. So make sure that we actually can capture some money backwards to help us out on this if it comes down to that vote. Right now, if we're looking at this, the numbers are way too high. I mean, it's not feasible now. The numbers you had before, and as we brought up earlier, the guy, Mr. Weaver said we could raise the building, but you're right, ADA compliance and everything else, by the time you get done, the cost is gonna be up there for a building that's antique already. So the cost of a new one's totally different.
All right.
Before we tear it down, though, we've gotta make sure that we do our due diligence beforehand, so that if we can capture any kind of money, it would be, make sure it doesn't slip through the potholes, and that we gotta make sure we can get what we can get out of it, recapture that.
All right, well, I think that's a timing and an application process, and that's also dependent on redevelopment, which we promised everyone that we would make into a public process, so that when the reimagining of that piece of land happens, it's not just first developer through the door with an idea. It'll be a public process for input. And so, yeah, the actual demolition might get delayed a bit, but the authorization is on our agenda for tonight for buildings A and B. And if someone wants to offer an amendment, we could add building C to that. I too can't defend the numbers as they came forward now. When it was a break even or close, I'm not one to tear down buildings that aren't that bad. I mean, I hate to waste an asset when it can be salvaged, but not salvaged at any cost. And so I guess I too no longer see the economic argument for keeping it. I think the building fits in pretty nicely even by itself next to the sailing club and the marina and the splash pad. It makes a nice little bookend for that area as it is. And if it cost the $100,000 that we were thinking, I thought, well worth that. If we're doubling that and not increasing our rents, then it's pretty hard to see why we would do that. So I guess I've come around as well.
As far as raising it up, Balmer Construction looked at raising it up, and he didn't think it was feasible to do that anyways, so. And he's a good reliable contractor, so if he said, you know, it's not worth raising up, it's not worth raising up, so.
All right, anything else on this? We'll reclose the work session. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. I want everyone to understand how much work Ashley has done on this. It's been a long and arduous process.
Yeah.
So Thank you very much. All right, next item would be our consent agenda.
This is to approve the special work session and regular council meeting minutes of February 17th, 2020. Approve the bills memo in the amount of $579,299.32. Proclaim April 19th through 25th, 2020 as National Library Week in the city of Grand Haven. Approve the Neighborhood Housing Services Department to apply for and, if awarded, accept the fiscal year 20 MISHDA, HEP, and HUD funds, which provide funding for housing counseling and education services to Ottawa and Muskegon County residents. Approve an amendment to the fiscal year 2019-2020 fee schedule to add a $5,000 fee for medical marijuana facility applications and medical marijuana facility permit renewals. Accept the low bid and approve the contractor services agreement with Advanced Pavement Marking in the amount of $27,679.72 for citywide pavement marking and striping, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Approve the low bid with Prine and Newhoff for engineering services for reliability studies for the North Ottawa water systems in the not-to-exceed amount of $113,100, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Accept the low bid from Melching Demolition in the amount of $46,000 for the demolition of Chinook Pier Buildings A, B, and C, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, now, our published consent agenda had item H at $38,000, not including building C. There was a sense or a consensus on council that we would add the $8,000 to that and turn it into a $46,000 figure and include building C, but I think we should probably amend the consent agenda accordingly. Okay.
I'll support that.
H.
Okay. So a motion by Fritz and supported by Dora to amend item H to add the $8,000 demolition figure for building C.
Thanks, Bob.
Questions? Any other items on the consent agenda? I mean, our other choice would be to do nothing with building C and just wait, but the question would be, what are you waiting to know more about?
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no other questions on the consent agenda, I think we're ready to vote.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Okay. We have a public hearing. I will open a public hearing concerning OCM Development, LLC, the applicant for an on-premise liquor license. Is the applicant here?
Good evening. Kristen Buter, Counsel for Meritage Hospitality Group, parent company of OCM Development. I believe that this item is recommended for approval, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have in addition to the application that was submitted.
Okay. Thank you. We are in a public hearing here. Does any member of the public wish to address council on this item? Seeing none, I would close the public hearing and turn this over to council and to staff for further comment.
No further comments here, Your Honor.
If you go with the motion, I'll make a make a motion to approve the resolution on approving OCM Development LLC, the applicant for an on-premise liquor license pursuant to section 521A1B of Public Act 501 of 2006.
Second it,
Okay.
if that's a motion.
Yes, I believe so, because once again, I missed that point. Motion by Cummins, second by Fritz. Consideration of the resolution. Yes, sir.
I want to make real clear that folks watching at home know what this is for. We've been talking about
Yes.
Class C on-premise liquor license. This is for the Morning Bell Restaurant that will be located on the corner of Columbus and Beacon Boulevard in what used to be a bank building.
That's correct.
And they'll be making a significant investment in that property. It is in the downtown development district. The DDA has endorsed this project. Well, they know about it. Okay. Jeremy endorsed it. But yeah, it's a significant investment. That building sat vacant and maybe underutilized for quite some time. They are working with our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority as well and has been approved for support there. So there's been a lot of involvement with the owners leading up to this point tonight.
Okay, thank you. Comments by council or questions?
Looks like a great breakfast menu to me.
Hoping being on the agenda with the power plant and marijuana use that mimosas and, wouldn't be too hard, but.
Who doesn't like a Bloody Mary in the morning, right? Oh, it's breakfast menu.
Yeah. Breakfast.
That's key too, I think, that it is a limited, menu, right, 7 to 3.
Yes.
All right, and then the bank building would be transformed and it was with an addition, I believe, on the north side.
That's correct.
And the house to the west will become a parking lot.
That's right.
Okay. And if we can get Columbus turned into a two-way street, that would probably be helpful as well.
It absolutely would be.
Okay, so we need to get back on that and maybe we can get the railroad to cooperate with us. Okay, any other thoughts, comments?
No.
Otherwise, I think we're ready to vote.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. First item of new business.
First item is to approve the Fulton Avenue reconstruction contract with the Michigan Department of Transportation in the not-to-exceed amount of $706,255 and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. The administration recommends approval.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And support?
Motion by Scott, second by Fritz. Welcome, Derek.
Derek Gatis, Public Works Director. Yes, this is exciting time for our roads with some state and federal funds. So we were awarded some TIP money, which is a Transportation Improvement Program from the federal government a couple years ago for Fulton Street in the amount of $415,000, and a Category F grant, it's an urbanization grant through MDOT for another $336,000. At the time, the estimate of just the road portion was all of that and $25,000. So it was almost a fully funded state and federal project. So since then, it has gone up a little bit, but we're getting a significant, over half of the cost of this project paid for through state and federal funds. The rest of it's going to be coming from our water fund. There's significant water mains that will be upgraded along Fulton and the intersection of Griffin as well. So our portion of the whole project is $706,000. The estimated cost currently is just over $1.4 million, and those bids will be open this Friday through the MDOT's statewide bidding process.
Okay. And so we are paying just under half of this,
That's correct.
and primarily for water main replacement.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is why we had to accelerate our lead and copper rule collections because of this project.
That is correct. We don't want to lose the funding.
Okay. Questions for Derek or Pat?
No, I'm just.
Are they gonna line the sewer line to that with this?
So the sewer line sanitary sewer was lined last year throughout the whole of that.
Okay.
So we're all
That's
all
set.
ready to go.
Okay, good, okay.
And included in this process, or this project, is a full storm sewer reconstruct as well.
I just want to say, it's nice to see at least half that money, or better than half that money, coming back to us, that our taxpayers have spent somewhere, somehow, someplace. They come back here to help us out a little bit, so it's nice to see some federal and state money coming back to us.
I agree.
Somebody
Great
object?
project. Job well done.
Ryan, anything? Nope. Okay. But in general, this is a full reconstruct then, except for the sewer has already been lined?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I just, this is probably part one of at least a three-part Fulton Street reconstruction. We're gonna do the entire west side, and the rest of Fulton on the east side will be forthcoming. And then I just wanna underscore Derek, he was relatively new here when he came to me and said, what do you think about trying to supplement that tip money with some category F money? And I said, well, I know council would love to see that, but if you got the stomach and the appetite for it. So it took a couple of years to be very patient and apply for these funds, and it adds considerable additional work for you, for the administrative staff, for finance, and most of all for Derek to cross all the i's and dot all the t's. But at the end of it, it is, as you've said, taking a local dollar and doubling it. We're stretching that one local dollar and making it $2 on this project. So Derek,
Well, thank
a
you.
lot of patience, a lot of extra effort by Derek.
Thank
and
you for
his
crossing the
team.
i's and dotting the t's.
That's well worth it.
And no bright shirts tonight.
Yeah. Toned it down.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Actually, I think Derek had the first caricature on the millage video.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Now we're just catching up.
I did.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Caught on to that.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. All right, next item.
Next item is to authorize notice of intent to issue revenue bonds for electric utility facilities, equipment, and site and system improvements.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
Okay, I'm not sure who jumped in first.
I'll support.
Okay. Motion by Scott, second by Dora. Okay. Now, there's been a lot of comment tonight, and there's been questions on the part of council members. And I asked that Mr. Bolche could be here to answer some of the specific questions as bond counsel. And so I guess at this point, Pat, or maybe Dave is in the audience, would like to just quickly preface this issue so that we understand what it is we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll kick off the discussion, I guess. Dave Walters, from the General Manager from the Board of Light and Power. I think just, first of all, I think it's important to note that this is a notice of intent. It doesn't approve any project. It doesn't pass, it's not a bond resolution to approve bonds. It doesn't set an amount, it sets a cap that you can issue. So there's a lot of things that this doesn't do. I think it's important to realize what it will do, and it allows us to move forward. I think a couple things I just want to point out, and then I think it is good that Ron, yes, some questions of Ron, because there's some legal questions. I know that I talked to Kester this afternoon late and got some of the questions, my questions answered. But I think it's important to realize is on page 2, the second whereas statement specifically says, the board has determined that it is or may become necessary for certain public health, safety, welfare, and the users of the system. So then it goes on to describe the project. And I think it's important to realize that the notice does two things. It says, first of all, it says certain things have been determined to be necessary by the board already. So there's several things that we've already approved. The demolition, $5 million. The substation, $4 million. Currently planned remediation efforts for this year is almost $2 million. AMI project that's included in here is for $2 million. That's already been approved. So to allow for future bonds to reimburse this amount, you have to pass this resolution tonight. So this is not something that you can push off, because if you push it off, it's exactly like Andy told you earlier. If you push this off, then you're preventing at this point in time, and that's section Section 3 of the notice, or of the resolution, specifically talks about reimbursement of things that we've already improved. So we really have to approve this resolution before we start expending dollars, else we can't reimburse ourselves with bond proceeds. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing is all these things that are coming down that we might use the resolution, the bonds for, those are all something that are up for discussion. It's all up for review, discussion. We aren't approving a power plant. We aren't even setting the bond amount tonight. We're just noticing a certain amount and allowing us to reimburse from that bond issue what we've already approved. So I think it's important that we kind of distinguish between the two of those.
Okay, thank you. Ed, did you have any further comment on this?
I do not. You know, some of the questions that were asked earlier, I think Ron is more of an authority to speak to that if you still want to ask some of the questions about whether or not this forces any particular action or whether or not this leaves us without further options. As Mr. Walters suggested, it's not a final action. This is not the bond authorizing resolution. This is simply offering a notice of intent. But should you do this tonight, it will set some things in motion, some additional planning and additional expense to move in the direction that's set forth in the notice of intent. And as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, those things are listed very clearly in the, you know, what those public improvements are listed very clearly in the packet tonight for anybody to read if they'd like to see what that is.
Okay. Ron, could you talk a little bit about Public Act 94 and what it allows you to do and what constraints it puts on what you may do?
Sure. Public Act 94 allows revenue bonds, allows bonds to be issued based on anticipated revenues. The advantage to that is that there is no limitation on what the city may bond. You have a limitation on how many bonds, how many dollars you may bond for with regard to general obligation bonds. These would not count toward that limitation because they are revenue-based. They are specifically for public improvements under Act 94. So it must be for public improvements. Within public improvements, there is a clause that allows bonding for utility systems for supplying light, heat, or power, including plants, works, instrumentalities, and properties for the provision of those public utility services. So this is a bond. This is an act that's designed to provide funds for this type of utility that is based on payment through receipts, revenue, and therefore does not count against your bonding authority. What you are looking at right now is a resolution of intent. A resolution of intent pretty well begs the question that there will be further action, there will be further actions asked of you because you're right now intending, if you would adopt this, declaring an intent to do something. So there would be further actions required of you. What you do with those further actions required of you is not set by this resolution. In order for you to eventually sell bonds, you would need to adopt a bond authorizing resolution. That would be a definitive act. That is not in front of you tonight.
So may future bonds as they're authorized, could it be done once or in various series? Can that be parsed out into various bond issues?
It can be done in more than one bond issue, and the advantages or the two specific things that you would accomplish by this resolution of intent would be, as has been pointed out by Dave, it would enable you to recapture all of the expenses incurred from here on out as part of the bond, the part of the cost for which you would get reimbursement through the bonds. And secondly, it begins the 45-day clock, or gives the ability to begin the 45-day clock on the referendum. The downside, or the thing to be careful of when dividing it into multiple series is we ultimately, wherever we stop, whether that's at the end of the process or we do part and we stop, we have to have a public improvement at that time, which, as I indicated, includes the provision of these public utility services. So I'm not opining, and my partner, Kester So, who is well-versed in power plants throughout the state and does a lot of these, is not saying that, that simply a cleanup operation would not be a public improvement, but that would not be a comfort level that we would have, that we would just clean up and not do anything further beyond that point. That really isn't providing any power. We would certainly recommend that there be something more beyond just a cleanup of the property with the bond proceeds, because you are obligated to reach the definition of a public improvement.
Would a non-generation facility satisfy that requirement?
Anything I'm not going to say that the cleanup, and Kester's not going to say that the cleanup would not do it. So the farther we get away from a cleanup, the farther we get down the road, the more secure we are. But a generation facility is certainly the safest approach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is locking us in, or putting us in more of a corner to where, from an attorney's standpoint, you're telling us the safest bet to get reimbursement for all these other things would be to build a generating facility.
Well, if you decide at some point in the future to authorize the sale of bonds, you're not at that point.
Well, fair. But
may I ask? I'd like to add just a little bit to that as well. I think this is a really big point as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think it just has to do with this notice of intent either. It really has to do with our rate charges, because our charter also suggests that the revenues that we collect can only go towards utility purposes. So if you're just going to make a park, the question becomes is not only can you use utility revenue dollars to make the park, it's not just using bond proceeds to do it, it's using revenues of the electric utility to pay to make a park or to make any other purpose that isn't for utility purposes, because our charter specifically says that the revenues that the electric utility collects can only be used for electric utility purposes. So it's more than just the bonds being utilized for a public project. It's our rates being used for a utility purpose. So the question becomes is if you're going to spend millions and millions of dollars to remediate that property, I agree that if you're not going to put utility facilities on that site, the question becomes is who's responsible for doing that? Now, from my perspective, it's the past utility customers that are responsible to clean up the plant and demolish the plant, not future utility customers.
Right. This is a very important distinction to make, because at this point, this notice of intent reads, some things may or may not be necessary. We've been told a number of times that a generating facility is something that has not been decided yet, and that decision will occur down the road, and we'll have more more discussion on that. And our attorney is indicating, at least at this point, that it may be questionable whether or not we can reimburse for all these other projects that are in this notice of intent if we don't actually build a generating facility at the end of the road, and that's very concerning for me.
And I think the question here.
And Ron, I want to make sure I said that.
Just
say
the
that
safest
correctly?
route.
Well, that's what I want to clarify. I mean, is this what we're being? I guess what's the recommendation? I guess because if they're gonna, if projects are being approved and there's money being spent and they're anticipating getting reimbursements from these bonds, and it's decided down the road when we're going to make the decision on a local generating facility not to do it, you're saying we may be in jeopardy of not being able to reimburse those other approved projects.
Well, you will, if you don't issue bonds, you aren't going to include any cost you incur in the bond issue because you're not issuing bonds. So that's where it falls apart. If you're not you're not making a decision at this point to issue bonds.
Correct.
So the sooner you do the notice of intent, the quicker the expenses you incur can be included in a bond issue if you issue it.
Right. But It sounds like the BOP is saying that there's a number of projects that they've already approved, such as demolition and some remediation work is going to begin this year. I think, Dave, you said $2 million, but they're expecting some bonds to be approved on that to reimburse those costs.
Well,
given that scenario, I mean,
again, but I would say to you, I would not expect that there would be contracts entered into for any of the services to be provided, to be funded through the bonds. Those contracts won't be entered into unless there's a bond authorizing resolution passed by you, which is not in front of you tonight.
I think those contracts, some of them have already been approved, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think at the last BLP meeting, or the one before, there was a contract just approved for the demolition that was over $5 million.
Right.
So, and you're indicating that we couldn't then reimburse, because that contract's already been approved, bonding couldn't.
Well, understand what reimbursement is from bond proceeds.
Right.
Of course, if you don't issue bonds, you're not going to use bond proceeds for them. You're going to pay for that one way or the other. The question is whether you can include them in the bond issue.
Correct.
And if there's no bond issue, which there still could be no bond issue, no matter what you do tonight.
Well, let's assume that there is a bond issue on those portions. You're indicating, though, that unless a generating facility is not actually included in that bond approval, that we may be on some shaky ground as far as reimbursement.
I'm telling you that Act 94 allows these revenue bonds to be issued for public improvements, including systems for supplying light, heat, power, etc. So that on its face, it does not authorize the issuance of bonds for cleanup of property. It allows for the provision of utilities which provide these utility services. Now, certainly an argument can be made that the cleanup of the property is the net result of having provided power through the Sims plant for all of these years. But bond counsel are not the most aggressive with interpretations when they're giving opinions on bonds. So I'm telling you that there would be caution in taking that position, that we are going to use revenue bonds simply for a cleanup operation.
As you just stated, the bonding can go for systems. And if I remember correctly at our last meeting, is that some of the systems that they plan on putting out there is the grid, because we're hooking up to the grid, there's going to be a building out there for operations and stuff like that, so that'd be another thing. Then we're going to be actually going for public input to get more input on what's else might be out there, where we do have generating plants. So this tonight is just the intent so that we can do it. So I'm ready to move forward on it for right now, just because of the intent, and have the public discussion so people can actually come forward and let us know more. And that's what you proposed at the last meeting we had with you. And that's what they've been saying all along. So just tonight is just for the intent. The maximum would be 75 million. It doesn't say we're going to have to be at 75 million. We might even come in at 35 million without or with. It doesn't make any difference. But the only thing, these people have an input on it, and be for systems that the BLP can capture. Even if we don't build a plant and they put systems out there, they still have an ability to capture some of that.
Yeah, and understand that, you know, we're talking about reimbursement, but it's not like it doesn't still get paid by the city. The question is whether it's paid out of cash reserves or whether it's paid out of bond proceeds.
Right, I understand that. I understand 100% where it's coming from.
Yeah, I just tried, I mean,
but it doesn't lose their cash flow for operating facilities and that. That's what I know what it's like to run a business. You got to have some kind of cash to run your business too. You got to have something for backup in time, because anything you do with a BLP is big dollars. I mean, there's nothing small about it. Everything you turn around, it's millions. It's just like we're doing our infrastructure. It's not 10,000. Just tonight it was $1.4 million. It's just like that. And if you take their cash flow away, how do you operate a business in that?
Right. But here, what Ron's saying though is that unless we go all the way, the safest bet is that put something that produces power, and that we're on some shaky interpretations if we don't go all the way in doing that. And we haven't really decided to do the actual local generation piece
Okay,
of this at this point. And right now, I mean,
I disagree.
that's what, I mean.
Okay, let me address that again, okay? So what has the BLP approved and what has the BLP haven't approved, all right? We have approved cleaning up the site, demolishing the plant, putting a substation on that site, and doing snow melt on that site, and putting additional facilities on that site. We are planning to put additional facilities on that site. The question is do those facilities include generation or not? No one is proposing not building any facilities on the island. No one is proposing that. So if the question is if we back up off our plans and not build anything on the island, can we use bond proceeds to clean it up? And quite frankly, the answer is it's questionable, but no one is proposing that, all right? No one is proposing not building a substation there. In fact, we've already issued the contract. And the more you build, the more you can say that there is utility purpose there. But that doesn't mean that if we only build a substation and only build a control room and snow melt systems, that doesn't meet the standard. In fact, you know, I asked this specifically later this afternoon for Kester. I think, you know, what council is saying is the more you put there, the more you can say that you have a project. But but no one's proposing putting nothing there, all right? No one is. So I think what somehow we've gotten into this discussion about, by approving a notice of intent, we're either deciding to get off the island or stay on the island. That has never been a choice. It's always been staying on the island and determining how much we put there. So I think that's the question that we're dealing with here.
The question's way bigger than that, but I have a lot of other questions, a ton actually, that have come out of our work session, or our joint meeting last week with the BLP. I don't know, you know, this is on our regular agenda. I think these are a number of questions. All the questions I have would probably be better in a work session type setting to have some discussion with them. And but you know, I'm okay with going forward with my questions tonight because I think they're important, especially given the the high number that we're talking about here. And this is the notice of intent to the public, and I'll make sure that we're getting all of our ducks in a row so the public has all the information available so they can make an informed decision on whether or not a referendum is something that they want to choose to take up, because this is their notice to them and their rights to do that under that. So, you know, and I think more questions, some significant questions have been raised tonight by our city attorney to work through some different scenarios and to get an actual, I think, more solid legal opinion on what, how far we have to actually take this before we're way down the road on something and all these things are being built with some things already approved. And then we find out, and we as a community decide we're not going to build a local generating facility, which we're being told that discussion is going to continue, and that we're going to engage the public on that, and then we decide not to build that local generating facility, but then we find out that, oh crap, we can't actually use the bonds or issue bonds for the reimbursement of those other items, and that is a concern of mine. But So I have a lot of other questions. I guess I'll leave it to this body. If I know medical marijuana is a good example. There was a lot to work through. We set it for a work session, a special work session to work through some of those questions and things. But if the council tonight feels like they're fine with moving forward with my questions here in this setting, I'll do it. I just want to let you know I have there's a lot of information to still be gathered. So I guess I'm asking my fellow council members tonight is something that you want to listen to me ask all my questions on, or if it's a work session that you think would be more appropriate for that.
Well, if I could just, I understand, I think, some of the concern, the hesitancy, the lack of definition to where we are exactly right now. On the other hand, that's part of the nature of the beast, because we haven't done all the study necessary to have those final answers. If we study the matter to get to the final answers, all of that time cannot be included in the bond issue. So that's kind of the conundrum that we find ourselves in. And I had that same discussion with Kester. Kester's not willing to give up on saying that cleaning up the property that was when the issue was caused by the power plant, and we can't leave the power plant just there, not functioning and an attractive nuisance and all kinds of liability attaching to the city if we just leave it there and walk away. We can't do that. But that certainly wasn't his most comfortable position. Adding the boiler system, adding the offices, adding things to the plant where we're actually, or to the property where we're actually doing something, he feels a lot better, but he doesn't feel as good there as he does if we actually have a generating plant. And that's kind of that's kind of the continuum that Kester had with regard to the comfort level. So, but in order for you to reach final decision on that and have all the studies done, you would be doing that in a way that you would not be able to put all of the costs of that study into the bond issue then, if you reach that level of finality before you made the decision to issue just the notice of intent. You will have all those answers before you issue the bond authorizing resolution. I mean, I certainly hope you will. I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll vote for it if you don't.
Right.
So my concern, I think Ryan's concern, but Ryan speaks for himself, is that we reach a point where we painted ourselves into a corner, that we have compelled ourselves to take future actions that we may not have intended to, because we have said we're going to approve bonds for X, Y, and Z, but we haven't done Q and S because they're a later stage in this process. And so if you do this in multiple phases of bonds, you might find that you've issued bonds, reimbursed yourself for costs, not built adequate facilities or not built an adequate public improvement. So now we got to build more, and now we don't have any choice. So that would be my concern. I understand the notice of intent only starts the clock on various things.
Right.
But when you get that first time you address a bond, and we come and we say we're going to authorize $40 million of bonds or $4 million of bonds or whatever it is put before us, and maybe later on we get another bite or something, at what point have you found yourself compelled to take further actions that you hadn't set out to do?
Well, I think that's exactly why you probably won't be asked to do it in multiple steps.
Okay.
There will be finality reached on what is going to be the big picture before you have a bond authorizing resolution. So you won't start the process of selling bonds until you know those things.
And you would advise us not to do it, not to go that route.
To do the series
To do a series
to do the
of bonds,
installments.
picking pieces off their list of things to do.
The resolution gives you that flexibility just because
It
it's
does.
going to include that flexibility so that if there are some things that happen that we're not thinking of right now, we at least have that ability because the law allows it. Again, that is not going to be the comfort level of bond counsel. Bond counsel is going to want to make sure that we have a full and complete project in order to issue bonds, so that you don't get painted into a corner where we started the process and sold some bonds, but we haven't gone far enough to meet the definition of a public improvement under Act 94. That's not a situation where you want to be. That's not a situation where we want to be.
So regardless of what we do this evening, that future bond authorization, whether it's 1, 2, or something, that needs to be fully fleshed out and fully understood by us before we vote yes on that.
Oh, absolutely, because then you're actually taking
Because we're
action.
clearly not there now.
Pardon me?
We're clearly not at that point now.
No, you cannot be there now. You cannot legally be there now. You don't have the authority.
I mean, we're not at the point of understanding enough at this point. We don't have all the facts, we don't have all the numbers, which you're working on.
I would like to add one more thing is, we are going, at this point in time, the plans are for a single bond issue in 2021, right? So what will likely happen is as we start incurring costs, and like I said, we're probably going to incur about $10 to $12 million this year. What we will do is those projects have already been approved and they're moving forward. The problem is that if we issue a bond or say Series 1 bonds in this year, and we don't know what they're going to cost. So what's likely in lieu of a bond issue, we would take out in the business community, we would call it a line of credit, construction loan. In the municipal world, they call it a short-term bond, but it's essentially, you know, a line of credit at the bank where we can draw upon, rather than take all the money out of the bank, we can draw upon this at a very low interest rate. In fact, it'll be lower than our bond interest rate because it's only for 1 year or so. We can start paying that off. Again, during that period of time, we'll also be finalizing what the plans are so that we don't issue too much or too little. And then sometime, you know, we can draw upon that, pay this amount without taking it all out of the bank, and then the future bond issue in 2021 will reimburse and pay off that short-term instrument and issue additional debt for the additional facilities that we would authorize in the next year or so. So the idea is yes, we are going to be issuing a series of debt instruments, but only one bond, and that would be sometime in 2021. So that's what your financial advisor, PFM, working in conjunction with your bond counsel, are already looking at, is what the best way to get that series, because it is a conundrum. What we're doing is we're starting to spend money without fully knowing what the amount is. So that's why the notice of intent caps what you're going to issue later on. It doesn't say we're going to issue 75, and I think, quite frankly, it's going to be substantially less than that, but we don't know until we go through this process, start spending money on the stuff we know we have to do, and then finalize the plans on what we are still considering doing. So that amount will be determined in the next 6 months to a year. We can start spending money and then reimburse those dollars with the bond proceeds that are issued in 2021. You don't have to make all of the decisions at this point in time, and quite frankly, very few people do. It's not normal to have everything all lined up. This is, as Burns and Mack said, this is 6 or 7 projects in one. So we have to start doing some of the projects, reimburse them, and then determine the full amount. And you know, I think in the next 6 months, if we can't prove that it's economical to build the electric generation equipment, that the cap that I told you guys last week was on electric generation is about 30 million. That of that 75 potential, only 30 million maximum will be spent on electric generation equipment. So all of the other stuff in there, which is probably going to be done, we'll be moving forward, we'll be showing stuff on that, and we'll be deciding whether or not that 30 million of electric generation equipment will be included in that amount or not.
So then the risk that we all would take would be that we approve a notice of intent, you take out your line of credit, you start doing all these things, anticipating that we actually approve a bond next year. So we would have to agree on what that bond would be, because if we end up not approving it, then what do you do?
That's why this is called a notice of intent. You're intending to do it. I mean, that is a fact. I mean, you're approving the intent to issue some level of bonds to reimburse this cost. So what exactly that amount is, you know, there's some flexibility there for you in the future, but you're not approving bonds. But I would say, at least, you know, from the board's perspective, and I think they know this, is that we have every intention of selling the bonds to reimburse us for the things that we know we've already approved. So, you know, those things, you know, $15 to $20 million is inevitable that we want to bond those. Now, whether or not that 30 million gets, you know, $10 to $30 million of electrical generating equipment gets added on to that 20 million or not, that doesn't mean that we're not going to do the 20 million that we already essentially approved and are going to move forward on.
But you're also taking the risk that whatever we might issue in bonds would be compliant with the act, which if it doesn't include local generation, there's questions on whether or not it would be. I mean, that's also the additional risk that I'm hearing.
The biggest risk that you have is not having the money to pay for what you've already approved. That's the biggest risk. So the biggest risk that you can do is do nothing tonight and then not be able to reimburse yourselves for the cost that you've already spent.
Well,
That's the biggest
Well,
risk.
what's the plan then if the bonds aren't approved then? I mean, that's backing us into a corner and saying we have to issue bonds. So if.
For the stuff that you've already approved. But for the
What's
stuff that you've
been
already approved, I would say that yes, you are committing now to pay, at some point in time, sell a bond to pay what you've already committed to building. We have every intention of selling that debt. There is no question about that. I'm not standing before you today saying we're going to be able to not do that and we'll use cash. We are not saying that.
But I think the key to that is keeping these preliminary costs at the driven toward the things that we know we have to do, as in demolish the plant, clean up the property. There will be some type of improvement on the property that doesn't go to the issue of the power generation plant.
Yep, I think
so. That's, I think that's what we're talking about. There are expenses that for sure are going to be incurred, and whether you sell bonds or not, you got to do something with the plant. You can't just lock it up and walk away.
Right.
Correct.
Yep, I think, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of obligation, both legal, moral, and every which way to take the plant down and clean up the site and turn it into something else other than what it is now. No.
Right.
The extent, and I think going back to, trying to speak to Ryan's position that we owe the public some engagement here, that we owe some meetings, work sessions, input, and listening to people that here's what we ought to do, here's what we ought not to do, but at some point, under this act, we have to demonstrate we've made a public improvement on the site. And that public improvement needs to be related to an electric utility so that they can use their rates to pay back the bonds. So I guess that, going back to what I said earlier, at what point have we approved so much that we must continue approving things whether we like it or not, no matter what our public engagement is? And so we're not getting a good idea of what these public improvements, the minimum must be.
Well, no, we aren't at that point.
So.
And secondly, just the reality is the act builds in that potential process. That's the 45 days and the potential referendum.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the reality of the act.
Right, and if people choose to file for a referendum and challenge the act, that's their right. And
That's the ultimate public participation, right?
So very, very much so. I mean, 5 years ago I was threatened with a recall. That's perfectly normal and perfectly proper. Didn't happen, but people are entitled to do these things. Hopefully, people will look at this process and be patient with it, but they only have the short window to do that.
Let me ask this question, if I can, Dave. So if intent passes through, there's not a referendum on this, we decide not to build a local generating facility, but bond counsel at that time advises us, well, you decided not to build a local generating facility, you don't comply really with this, to use bonds at that point, for, the bonds that you want for reimbursement on this. What is the plan to pay for those things?
Our plan right now
or reimburse
is to build utility facilities on the island.
I understand that.
Okay, so
you do everything you plan to do except the local generating
right.
facility.
And I believe, and I talked to Kester probably after Ron did, but if we just do that, the electrical substation, the snowmelt system, the office facility, and some of the other things, I believe that Kester is entirely satisfied that we will meet the requirements of the act because we've remediated the island and we've put electrical facilities on the plant, whether we build generation or not. Now, the question is obviously when you put generation there, it's a no-brainer at that point in time. Then we have obviously put enough facilities there, all right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that if we don't build, if we If we build an electrical substation, we build the snow melt building, we build some of the other facilities that we're talking about, that isn't a public purpose. I think it is. I think it's a utility purpose, and I think we'll meet the requirements of the act. But so the scenario that you're proposing is not one that the BLP is proposing. If we only do demolition and site remediation.
No. I said if you built everything out that you plan to do except
I think if we build everything else, I don't think it'll be an issue. And I believe that's the specific question that I asked Kester after I think he talked to Ron, and he is entirely comfortable. The other thing that's in the project is AMI. I mean, that's a utility purpose. So there's certain things in the bonds that I think are pretty justifiable that they are a utility purpose. Now, I suppose someone can challenge it at some point in time and say that, and that's, I think, the unknown area is there is no clearly defined, 50% of the project has to be for this, and only 25% of the project needs to be for, site remediation, demolition, that sort of thing. There is no clearly defined, benchmark that we could say, well, there has to be at least this much of the bond is in there. I don't think there's clearly defined rules in that regard. So I think what council is telling us all is to say, the more you put in, the better and more likely that you're going to not have that problem. They have not said that if we do this, that it becomes an issue. So I think that's I think we're trying to make a point that really the board is not saying at this point in time that we're going to do. And really the only reason this issue came up is there's a recent discussion about the BLP vacating the island. And that has never been our intention. I believe this is a question I asked specifically to the council last week is that your intention that we vacate the island? If we're not going to vacate the island, we're going to use it for utility purposes. I don't think this will be, and quite frankly, even if we reserve it for future utility purposes, I think we could even make an argument at that point in time.
Well, let me speak to that point. I think even if you built out new facilities for an operations center or an office, I don't think this notice of intent requires that it even be on the island. So, I mean, that discussion is a different discussion. I mean, you could still build everything that you're anticipating in a multitude of places. That, like I said, is a separate discussion. I'm simply worried about, we have a notice of intent going out. I want to make sure that we're notified.
I think it's specifically to this site. If
this doesn't say Harbor Island in the notice of intent.
No, but that's where the substation is getting constructed. That's the boundaries of the quote project is for the most part Harbor Island.
So we're locking our community members even more into a plan that they want to have more feedback on. I mean,
I think that if you're doing the demo remediation cleanup on Harbor Island to support electric utility purpose, I think that's where he's coming from, that doing all these improvements somewhere else has nothing to do with that, then you've broken that connection.
Well, then that backs us into a corner even more.
So here's the backup position that I would see is that if at the end of this process we can't use these bonds for reimbursing the costs that are being incurred as we speak, the city can still go back to taking this on as a general obligation bond with full faith and credit of the city, which it is not doing under this system. So now it's going to compromise our ability to borrow money, but it would be another way to finance these specific things because they don't require it be electric utility. Now that's going to become, instead of a burden on ratepayers, it's a burden on taxpayers.
Correct.
And I don't think that I'm particularly excited about going there, but that's another option, and that's an option for the future when the actual bond issue is presented to us, which isn't here now. So I personally don't have a problem with the notice of intent, but I may have a problem when they come forward with the bond, whether it's complete enough, whether it contains things that we would like to take a different direction or things where we're happy with the direction. That's something we don't know at this point. I think it is important to start this clock ticking. So we're not obligated to anything in particular until we vote on the actual bond.
And if that's the will of certainly this body, I'd be very much will respect that. But I think there's some information that still needs to be clarified to the public and their notice of intent that sounds like they're gonna get very soon. That it's real clear. On your presentation last week, there was, you provided some numbers to us, which was good to see. It covered, you know, a 25-year payback, and what, you know, that the bond issue plus the interest would cost per year. But the notice of intent, we have that it could be up to 35 years of repayment on that. So I just kind of want to get some clarification on given your financial projections with that 3.9% interest rate. At 25 years, we were looking at $42.5 million of interest. If we were to do the max, which I know we're saying we're not going to do the max.
The 3.9 is, I mean, the longer you go out, the more interest you're going to pay. So, I mean,
do we know how much at 35 years it would be?
35 years is going to be a very odd issuance. I mean, that's just the max. Again, you're looking at the maximum structure that
I know,
they have
I realize
there.
that, but this is also the...
We're hopefully looking at a smaller bond issue in the 20 to 25 year realm, all right?
Right.
So, but again, you have to determine what the facilities are, and then you have to look at the best way to fund it.
Yep, and I think that makes sense. But this is the notice of intent to the public that we may do up to that amount, so I think it's incumbent upon us to at least let them know what the potential highest amount of interest is that they could be paying based on the current financial projections.
But we can still say, when we approve it, we're not approving that.
Correct, yeah, we're not locked into a certain amount, but I think the public should know, well, if they decide to do this, am I okay, since we were asking the public, are you okay with us potentially issuing this much in bonds, which could potentially have this much in interest over a 35-year period? I mean, that's you know, this is a significant amount. I mean,
I think I would like to go back to Bob, your scenario for just a minute, just to answer that question and put it to bed, is I think there is a question for the city. And the question for the city is do you want the BLP to just demolish the plant and move off the island and do whatever we minimally need to do and then turn the site over to the city? Now, I can assure you that when that happens, we are not responsible for all of the, and somebody I think made a point here earlier that stood up and said, let's just return that island to the pristine level that it was before the BLP took over it, all right? That is, we all know that to be not true, all right? If we get off the island and leave it for someone else to finish the efforts and on redevelopment, I think the point of the matter is then you will, as a council, be looking for something else to fund it. Because if we don't use it, we can't use electric revenues to clean up that beyond what we used. So then you would be looking for some other funding mechanism. What we're proposing is to use electric revenue dollars to finish the project. And to do that, the quid pro quo is that we have to utilize the island. It has to be part of the project. And for that, the city is getting, I mean, what we've already told you is that we are going to decrease our footprint there. We're going to cut our footprint more than in half, and we're going to shrink our footprint and then restore the rest of the island to some sort of, pristine site as best as we can leave it. But I think the question is who funds that? And the funding is going to go with who occupies it. If the city is going to occupy it, they're going to have to come up with some money or some future person to do it. If the BLP is going to occupy it, those costs will be reimbursed in the bond.
I appreciate your comments. I don't want to filibuster this.
You're doing a good job of it.
I'm not. I just want the question answered. I just want.
But the thing of it is, right now, all we're looking at is the intent, and we don't know how much it is. We don't know what the rate's going to be. You can project and think it is, but you don't know because then you're assuming. And when you assume, you know what that word is. You take the word ASS and they put a U and a me on it. I don't want to assume nothing right now. But the only thing is they want to do is they want to come in for an intent. And that's all it is for, issue of intent. And I don't care what the cost is later because we don't know that right now. When it comes in, then I'm more worried. Right now, I just want to make sure we get the intent form. That's all they want to do. We don't know if it's going to be for 10 million, or if we don't know if it's going to be for 75. They said, okay, this is a maximum we're going to have. We don't know if it's going to be at 3.9% because it might be changed tomorrow. It might even drop down more because who knows where the economy goes. They might want to, whatever. But you don't know all those numbers.
Well, it
As you
does-
said, as Ron was saying earlier, it's not our ability to have all that knowledge right now. All we have to, when they start getting the projects, that's when we have to have that knowledge.
And I disagree to a certain extent. $75 million.
They're the people out there, tell them that, yes, we're gonna issue all this. I'm not that kind of person.
I'm not scaring anybody. I'm saying that
Good job.
$75 million is what.
Doing a good job.
Okay, well, that's your,
Let's just keep this as a discussion on
Right.
the issue here.
$75 million is what's on the notice of intent. That's the rate that the BLP is saying would be rate neutral. They have to have some kind of financial projection on what the interest is on that to know that it's going to be rate neutral. So I think it's a fair question to ask what the total amount of interest is that folks could potentially be paying, so they know that rates are actually going to stay neutral then for the ratepayers on this. I think that's a more than valid question. The Burns McDonald report, there was a document in there that talked about other possible funding sources for things like remediation. And actually, the only thing in that funding document, I think it was a funding document that the BOP actually put together. This is straight from the Burns and McDonald report. It talked about a new power plant would be financed through proceeds from a utility bond issue. Talked about decommissioning the old plant would be budgeted from the Grand Haven Board of Light and Power funds with potential support from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. That the snowmelt system, BLP would be seeking $1.25 million in U.S. Economic Development Administration Public Works grants with a 50% local match. That the environmental assessments, cleanup, and reuse planning would be seeking $100,000 from U.S. the EPA and various other sources, brownfield agreements, environmental assessments, from brownfield cleanups, and then some green space revitalization would come from, or they'd be seeking a variety of sources. So this resolution in this notice of intent states that essentially that bonding has been determined to be the best source or the best source of funds for all of the things that are in the project. And so I just want to know, have we looked at other funding sources for, or are we going to look at other funding sources for pieces of the project?
Okay, and the council wouldn't know this, what the board did, is the board authorized a consultant, before the Burns and McDonald study was done, they looked at what they call the funding roadmap.
Okay.
About potential dollars that were available out there for various things. We're not saying that in fact, quite frankly, we're still gonna try for all of that stuff that's listed there. I think what Burns and Mac did is they pulled our funding roadmap and said, here's some things that you can look at. Now, we haven't been granted any of those, all right? But I think before we issue a bond, if we can get some environmental work, some MEDC contributions, some other things, we would obviously offset the bonds with the grant monies that we've received. However, at this point in time, we haven't received anything. Now, even though it might be listed as a potential opportunity in the Burns and Mac study, all they did was go back to the funding roadmap that the BLP had commissioned as possible avenues for refunding.
Okay, fair enough. And I think that's
Okay.
glad to hear that that those things are going to be.
Well, if I could just kind of back up a step.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in are the options as they close and the potential off-ramp, if you want to call it that, or other things we might do. Because if we issue an intent, money is spent anticipating reimbursement, and later on that doesn't happen, then the money has to come from somewhere. The short-term loans would have to be paid. They would have to pay them probably not out of their cash flow, because they got to run a utility. I think at that point, you would make a case that, well, if it's not an electric utility, then what is it? Well, it must be us. So then, is that what you're looking at? Because as Ron, as Dave, as everyone has said, there are certain things we need to do.
I
We
agree.
need to get rolling on them.
I 100%
And
agree
so,
with that.
Like I say, I for one don't have an issue with the intent, but I may have an issue with the actual bond proposal later on, and we don't have enough information to know what it is. We do have an idea as to where it might go, and if we're not comfortable with that, we have to know what we're going to do about that later. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. Mike, you look like you're anxious to say something.
I agree with Mike. I'm perfectly good. I've got the information I have to go with the intent to issue bonds. It all has to come back to us for approval, and if it's something that we don't like, then we're gonna have to work a way through it, one way or the other, as Bob has stated. But the thing that's in front of us right now is not really all of that. It's just the intent to do that, and I'm fine with moving forward on that.
I agree. I think that's true. This just starts the process, is all this does.
Yep.
It's just the first part of the process to get this thing rolling. We need to get it rolling.
Thank you.
So I'm fine with it.
I would like to add just one thing. Is almost 2 years ago today, or 2 years ago last month, to the day almost of our last meeting, I came before the council and that was the board, and then later on the council, and suggested that we shut down Sims. I think Jerry's no longer here, but I think I was hit on pretty hard at the time, for being one of the only ones in this community that said, I think we can get by without building anything. And you guys all know that to be the fact, and I probably, for those people up here in the audience that don't know that, I was the first one to say that we probably didn't need to build anything. Now, I've always said since that date that we aren't going to build anything that doesn't make financial sense, right? At no time did I ever say that we would build something just for the sake of building it. And the only way that I would come before you and recommend that we build something is if it makes financial sense. In other words, if it's less expensive to build some backup generation here than to go out and buy it. That's what I told you last week is likely the scenario. I told Josh a number of times that if he just lets us finish the analysis and present the facts, we are not going to recommend building anything if we're going to lose $40 million doing it. So that scenario is not on the table. It's not in the next 6 months. If we cannot prove to both yourselves and the public that this makes economic sense, then we aren't going to propose any generation. I'm telling you that here tonight again. And I've told it to you over and over again in the last 2 years. So I don't think I'm changing my mind. I've said it from the get-go. We are only going to build something if it makes financial sense. The other thing that I need to remind all of the, quote, environmental people that have come in here, the one reason why we're building this facility, one of the major reasons why we're building this type of resource, is it actually promotes us using more renewables. Because renewables, when you buy them, solar and wind and other things, it is an intermittent resource. Batteries do not solve it. Batteries allow you to save a few hours of generation. They don't allow you to save months of generation. So by building this type of facility, it is actually the type of facility that's being rewarded in the marketplace because it can come on when solar and wind is offline. Traverse City was brought up here. Traverse City is going to 100% renewable. One of the major reasons why they can do that is they have a 36 megawatt simple cycle generator sitting in Kalkaska that they can buy against. So these cities that are saying, well, geez, these are 100% renewable, the only reason they can go to 100% renewable is because they have backup generation that they can call upon. So, you know, that's, I think the economics of this whole thing we can prove, and if we can't prove it, it isn't going to go forward.
Dave, one question. The backup renewables that you're talking about, they either have to be coal, gas, or probably atomic power. Is that correct? Or is there something else out there that I don't know about?
A renewable resource requires backup generation, and for the most part right now, all that is gas. Because no one's building coal, all right? No one's building nuclear.
Right.
It has to be a, quote, dispatchable unit. So that means that it can be stopped and started by somebody when they want it, not when the sun's blowing and when when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing. It needs to be dispatchable capacity. So if we don't build it ourselves, we're going to have to buy that dispatchable capacity from somebody else because it has to back up those renewable purchases that we're generating. And if we go to 40, 50, 60% renewables, you're gonna have to have some backup generation that's standing there, that's ready to come online. If you don't own it, you'll have to buy it from somebody else.
And if we buy it, we gotta keep buying it. If we build our own, eventually we get it paid for and it's ours, correct?
All right, so I guess,
If the public takes up a referendum on this, like we're hearing some people may have an interest in that, how would that affect the bond rating potentially?
The bond rating?
Correct, so even if, so say it ends up on a ballot and it passes, and folks are like, yep, they're good with it, would that affect the bond rating if folks take up a referendum on this?
I don't believe, I mean, obviously, if they deny it, then
Then
we
we're
aren't
done.
issuing debt.
Right.
All right? So, then we won't be going for a bond rating. I don't think the public voting, in favor of going forward with the bonds will necessarily affect our bond rating. I do think, and, you know, I think this is something that you all need to consider is if the more public opposition to a project, and I'm talking more in the council and board realm, I think governance is a portion of the rating. So that means that you will all be evaluated the same as I will be evaluated from a governing perspective on the bond. So if we're infighting and not supporting things and you know, fighting, then obviously that will impact the rating. When we're all 100% and the community is saying, yeah, we all want to move forward, we're all in favor of this, then I think that shows that the project is supported, because what they're rating is the likelihood that we'll raise rates accordingly and do everything else in the future to support this project as it goes forward, as is necessary. So I don't think a referendum necessarily in and of itself will affect the rating, but if as a result of that referendum it comes out that, you know, the community doesn't support the project and we go forward with it anyway, then I think, yeah, it will have an impact.
Can you issue bond anticipation, like, so say it ends up on a ballot, I know you can't issue the bonds, we can't decide anything on the actual issuance of the bonds until that election, can you issue bond anticipation, can't talk.
well, I think that,
Anticipation notes, those short-term,
they're doing that anyway.
so you can, so if it ends up on a ballot, you could still take those out and get the financing that you're looking for.
No, no, because those would be issued with the understanding, those short-term notes would be issued with the understanding that they're reimbursed the following year with a bond issue.
So if folks get this on the ballot, then that stops your ability to collect those then? And that puts...
It would require us to pay cash.
Okay. And these are all concerns
that would require us to pay cash for the items that we've already committed to doing, which is, just so you know, I mean, a lot of people say $20 million cash is a lot of money. We're required as a utility to have about 6 months O&M in cash. Our O&M budget, without debt service, is somewhere around $26 million. So, as a minimum cash balance, we should keep somewhere on the order of $12 to $15 million. That's what our cost of service and rate analysts are suggesting that we keep online. So somewhere in that range. Now, could we take the money out of the bank and utilize it for this? We also have other capital improvements. Our 5-year capital improvement plan is actually for $87 million. So if we don't issue any debt and we start taking that down, you're going to have other projects coming down the pike that I'm going to have to come before you and issue another notice of intent for bonds to finance the other stuff that we have to do anyway using the cash that we have on hand. So, you know, I mean, this whole thing's got to fit together. So the financing is more than just this particular project. It's to finance our entire 5-year capital improvement program.
All right. So on the matter of the notice of intent, is there more discussion this evening?
I have plenty more to say, but I think it's,
Yeah, but I think we've kind of come to a point of going in circles too.
Yeah.
So
Well-
I think that there will be plenty of opportunity for us to speak and for the public to speak before bonds are actually issued.
well, hopefully they don't
If-
take up a referendum on this and pause the whole thing, that's the concern.
If they do a referendum, that would certainly be their right. If it ends up on the ballot,
True, yeah, they gotta get signatures, no
then
doubt.
that would be a pause on everything.
Well, I will say, I think this, I'm gonna go on the record and say, I think this should be a direct vote of the people regardless, even, I don't even think we should be taking this to a notice of intent to just do a referendum. We have done numerous capital projects, from a city standpoint, water facilities and water mains and roads and bridges and all kinds of things. Linda did all kinds of research looking back to 1913 and all the different ballot questions we've looked at whether or not we want to issue this much in bonds or do this kind of a millage. And we send it to the people to decide and let them, we're debating what people want and don't want. That's the ultimate vote in the end, right? And so, let people just have a direct vote on it and we can all move forward and we know what people want at that point and we're good to go. The city can't even issue this much in bonds. We can only issue up to $65 million based on our state equalized value. So this is even higher than what the city could, at a max, do. Yet we're not sending this to a direct vote of the people.
I think, Ryan, first of all, I think it's likely that we're going to have a referendum with that kind of talk, all right?
Oh, by far.
So I think the question is have we ever, as a community, ever had a vote of the people for electric revenue bonds? And the answer is no.
Okay.
Okay? And we issued $100 million of electric revenue bonds or almost 100 million, 90 plus, and they've been refunded several times over the last 30 years, and never once did we ever bring that to the public for a vote. So that's not how this is not a GO issue tax revenue bond, or tax bond. This is a electric revenue bond that's paid for with the rates that customers are paying. And what we need to be really clear with everyone is this bond issue, regardless of the size, will not impact their rates. Now, if we were going to raise their rates 20% or 50% or something like that, I would agree with you. We probably better take that to the ratepayers. But what we're suggesting is there is no rate increase that's brought about by this amount of debt. So that's what we should be telling people. We should be telling people what actually is going to happen rather than to suggest what's not going to happen. So if we tell them what's not going to happen, then yeah, it's likely that we're going to have a referendum, but at no point in time did we ever suggest that this would impact your rates. In fact, we said just the opposite.
Nor did I.
Well, and I think that a lot of and when Linda did the research on that, she didn't investigate the building of Sims, the building of Sims 1 and 2, the building of the steam plant, the diesel plant. I think the original plant on Harbor Drive in 1894 was private and bought by the city. And the very first one was a private facility that was bought by the city, so it goes way back then. But yeah, they're paid for by ratepayers, not taxpayers.
I'm well aware of where the funding's coming from.
It's just the way that system works, so it's not surprising that there was not put on a ballot.
I think the important thing to recognize here as well, too, is that half of our customers live outside the city. So they're paying a significant portion of this improvement is people outside the city.
Those people wouldn't be voting if we put it on the ballot.
You're right, they wouldn't. They don't get the vote for their Board of Light and Power either.
No, I heard a lot about that when we were talking about
So, they're not getting representation.
The early, or the town hall meetings, particularly the ones that BLP conducted. I heard a lot of that from people who live in Ferrisburg and
I heard a few
Grand Haven
people
Township
stumble
and
there.
such that, we don't get any say on this.
Right.
But this, what's in front of us now would be supported by the ratepayers. And it's all potential at this point. So at this point, the notice of intent serves this purpose and it serves notice to the public and gives them a lot to think about. But it is also something that there's several more bites at the apple, and there's also an assurance, and we've all heard it, that they won't pay more. They may not pay less, but they won't pay more for their power. So the other issues, land use issues and such, and potential changes of that, those are kind of outside of the notice of intent. It does start to close options. I mentioned this before, that decisions made over the past 3, 4, 5 years have funneled us into fewer options. And that's likely to continue, and that's why I asked Ron to be here to talk to us about at what point have we painted ourselves in a corner, at what point have we committed ourselves to do something we didn't set out to do, what are our off-ramps, what are our options at that point. And I think we have those. I think that we have ways to deal with this, and so.
We do, but some of those costs may end up on us in the end, so.
Well, okay, but certain things are going to happen. Certain things are obligated to happen.
Yep. Don't get me wrong, I'm fine with tearing down Sims and starting that remediation work. I don't have any problem. We want to do a notice of intent simply on that part, or do a bond on that separately, with whatever bonding funds we can use for that. I don't have a problem with that. It's backing us into a corner that I have concerns with, so.
All right, so on that note, should we vote or should we discuss more?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comment?
Ready to vote?
All right,
I'm glad we're being reassured that it's gonna be no higher rates.
Yes, we've
And
heard
so,
that
and
numerous
it's
times.
not coming from any of the taxpayers, it's actually from the ratepayers, so.
That's all been stated numerous times.
Absolutely.
All right, so then we have a motion, I think it's been a while. We have a motion that we've been discussing, so I think we're ready to vote.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right. But I'm glad we had the discussion. I'm glad we had the council here to talk to us about it. I'm glad we aired the entire issue where all could hear it, because I think it's an important issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item, unfinished business.
Next item is to approve a final resolution amending Chapter 9.5, Business Regulations, Article 4, Marijuana Establishments of the City of Grand Haven Code of Ordinances.
All right, the second reading, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Ron.
Waiting for a second. Ryan moved this second reading. Waiting for somebody to second it.
Oh, the marijuana?
Yes.
I'll support.
Okay. Motion by Cummins, second by Dora. Second reading of the regulatory piece of the medical marijuana establishments. It's been discussed at great length. Is there more discussion, other points to be made? Anyone?
The questions I had, I didn't see it in here. I asked Jennifer was about the signage and that falls under the state, what it has, so I'm pretty well set with it then.
Okay.
I was just more worried about, because they had a couple constituents that came in and worried about the different signage that was gonna be up there, and after getting a reading on it and how the state says how it has to be, I'm pretty satisfied with it. I don't think they wanna lose their license if they don't wanna follow the state rules.
I'm pretty sure they don't. Anything else?
No, I think it's a good regulatory framework to oversee these types of businesses and address concerns that may or may not arise. So.
Yep. I think we're ready to vote.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
No.
Manetza?
Yes. All right. We are to the report by City Council. Who would like to go first?
Well, let's see, I attended the airport board meeting. Everything's looking good there. Like I say, fuel sales were up, hangars are full. Upkeep on some of the tree trimming is moving along. Looks like that's gonna all come to an end here in another month or so, so that's looking good. Attended the Walk the Beat information for the upcoming concert series they have in August. Got some plans going for that. The East End Association was also there. Kind of gave everybody a little update of the progress they've been making and their upcoming plans that they're going to move ahead with to get that finalized and stuff put into place. Also, I have in front of me a couple cans of goodies, 3 of them to be exact. Backpack Blessings is a program that the city is kind of helping to sponsor, where they're asking for donations for kids so they will have something to eat during spring break. A lot of children in the area, over 300 to be exact, sometimes the only meal they get is at school. So they've put out a list of 3 things that they need some help and donations to gather up. The can of mushroom soup, a 12-ounce can of chicken, and a 14.5-ounce can of green beans. And it would sure be appreciated if everybody could pitch in and pick some of those up and drop them off here at the city or the community center. The chamber takes them, D&W takes them, JW's will take them, Odd Size will take them, WGHN is on the list, they'll take them. I know Mary Angel would just be happy as could be if you filled her office. So that's my punch for that. Anybody out there would care to donate, I'd be happy to get it.
Yeah, I also attended the Walk the Beat kind of open house and discussion with them about their plans for their event this year. And then attended a East End kind of a reorganizational meeting with them last Monday at, they gathered a group of business owners and residents from the East End together last Monday at Outside Ales. And so really good to see that group kind of reorganizing and, you know, repurposing some things and working on some, you know, advocacy for, you know, the East End of town. So glad to see their work. They're starting to keep some minutes and trying to kind of reorganize a board and come up with some new rules and bylaws and make sure they're all good to go with their nonprofit status that they have. And so hopefully we can provide some good support to them going forward. They seem to have a lot of excitement and want to run on some recent, you know, redevelopment and momentum that they have. And so really glad to see that. So that's all I have.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, frozen in time. It was great to be down there. Seeing Mr. McGinnis, he was working so hard there trying not to move, but he couldn't help him. We're all standing out there making funny faces at him. And him and Ashley was in there. It was nice to see that. And also what I really like to see down there is I was down there, which these promotions that we do downtown like that, it brings people out. And actually, I seen people with bags in their hand. I know Mr. McGinnis and Ashley, if you're staying, you've probably seen people walking along and they had bags in their hand. When they have bags in their hand, I mean they stopped and bought something, which is, I appreciate so much of them to shop local like that. So that really helps us 100%. It helps our businesses down there, especially at this time of year. For one thing, it's when it's short season for them, there's no tourists, and they need all the business and people to come down there. So by doing these little promotions that they do down there, it definitely brings out the community, and they do support them down there, which I really appreciate a lot. So I want to thank you, everybody that went down there and participated in it. And also participated in the Economic Development Corporation and the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And we are having some, the old Clark Station is going to be turning into a nice facility. Hungry Howie's is what they're talking about. So that's in a process of moving forward. And we also talked about the restaurant that was just here tonight for us. They had to come up for us and that. So it's been moving right along. We've had some other options coming in. We're still trying to work on the Stanco property a little bit, trying to get some information from them, but we're just waiting for the developers and see what's going on that. So in the meantime, baseball's coming upon us. So I'm ready for baseball. So it's that time of year. I'm missing March Madness.
It's playing in Florida right now. You can go down there and watch baseball.
I know. That's all I have to report.
All right, thank you. Well, I have a couple of things. I participated in a tabletop emergency response exercise at Public Safety led by Chief Hawk. Thought that was very interesting. It left me with the impression that we are pretty well prepared for a lot of things that may go wrong. We have a public safety and public works people who think forwardly about potential disasters, potential problems, things we have to react to, have things in place, have thought processes and procedures in place. I was impressed with that. There is a support emergency operation plan. I've picked up a copy, which is developed in tandem with the county emergency manager, Nick Bonstall, and with Chief Hawk and his people. It's not real lengthy, but there's a lot of information there on how we deal with things that may go wrong. So I think we're, like I say, it's an interesting exercise. I've done some of these when I was employed at Howmet. We did Factory Mutual would come in and do tabletop exercises if you had a big fire in your plant or something. So this one was focused on high water problems, big storm coming, what are you going to do? And I thought it was good to see all the pieces that could be in place ahead of time, things that you would react with, and everybody knew kind of what they would have to do so that there would be no surprises. You know, there's always surprises in life, but you deal with them as best you can. That was a good exercise. Today I attended a meeting with the Energy and Environment Committee in Lansing for Michigan Municipal League. We discussed a number of things, but the one that I thought was most significant was that there's a bill, House Bill 5423, which is passed out of the House and is currently in the Senate, which modifies distribution of bottle deposit funds and earmarks from the bottle deposit fund for non-recovered deposits. And it's a fair amount, it's like $33.5 million. And what the bill does, and one of the sponsors is our own Jim Lilly, it takes some of the money, which about $20 million that went into cleanup and redevelopment fund managed by Eagle, and it gives about $6.7 million of that to beer and wine distributors, and it gives about $5 million of that to the Michigan State Police, and it zeroes out the contribution of the cleanup and redevelopment fund, and it basically cuts the Eagle portion of this from $25 million to $13 million. So this bottle deposit fund, the unclaimed bottle deposits, currently support cleanup and redevelopment fund, which occurs in our town. In fact, about 5 blocks from me, there's a site that they're assisting with. And it basically cuts that in half, zeroes out that fund, splits up the remaining money between a couple of other efforts on the part of Eagle, but takes $11.7 million from that bottle deposit funds and puts it in places where you might not expect. So I think this is kind of a grab, and I think it's kind of this is bad politics. So if you care to follow up on that, it's House Bill 5423. There's companion bills 5424 and 25, and a previous bill 5422, which seeks to redefine what bottles have deposits. I don't know that one went anywhere. But take a look at those, contact your local legislator, tell them what you think of what they're doing for us, because it isn't good. So on that editorial note, I guess I'm done. So report by city manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would start by I guess I could prepare a resolution for your next agenda if you wanted me to research that a little bit and put something together about our position, because we have had funds from the bottle redeposit, unclaimed deposits, applied to environmental projects in the city to make some undevelopable sites developable, and that's important to us. So to see that money being siphoned off in different directions, I guess maybe I could ask Representative Lilly what his thinking is. Maybe we're missing something there, and so I'll see what I can find out about that.
I'm sure we're missing something there.
A couple things. The Fulton Street meeting is this Wednesday, I believe. Derek still here? Took off. No. This Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. At the Mackinac Room. It's the neighborhood meeting. We've sent out letters to everybody along the Fulton Street corridor just to get everybody ready for the harsh reality that is going to be Fulton. We were celebrating earlier about coming up with the state and federal money for that. Reality is going to be significant traffic disruptions. Fulton's a very busy, important street. So this is from Albee all the way down to Beechtree. So you're not gonna be able to go north and south on Griffin for quite a while. And a lot of that factory traffic wants to come down and go out Griffin to Jackson, so that's gonna be filtering through other directions. We're probably pushing them up to Robbins Road, Waverly, Grant, Taylor. They'll be taking different streets, so it will be a very interesting first half of the summer. So you can learn more about that detail tomorrow if you wanna come to the Fulton Neighborhood Meeting at 5:30 at the
What day?
community. I'm sorry, Wednesday.
Wednesday.
This Wednesday. March 11th from 10 a.m. till noon. I'm looking for 2 council members who would be available from 10 a.m. till noon on March the 11th. It's a week from this Wednesday, for an Ottawa Sands planning meeting. You're familiar with the Ottawa Sands property that the county purchased just north of the city? A big chunk of that's in the city. So the county Parks and Rec want to come in and talk. There's a few planning commissioners are going to join us, and they'd like myself, and if there's a couple council members, I don't know if anybody wants to jump at it. Mike?
Jump on it.
Okay, Mike and Mike, the Mike and Mike.
The Mike and Mike show.
Okay.
All right, that sounds great, if you guys are available.
Is there no limit on who may attend, or you just?
Well, if we had more than that, it would be a potential quorum, so we're trying to, one of those things.
You don't wanna notice it?
Well, we could notice it, I guess, yeah, if that's,
Well, if Bob wants to go.
we could notice it as a notice of a potential quorum.
Yeah,
So
why
we'll
don't
just do that.
Why don't you do that? You know you got 2, you might have a 3.
Just in case the third one happens to stop by for a cup of coffee, we'll want to be safe, so we'll make sure we notice that.
Now throw that
Also
out.
on, what's that?
If they throw that date out on time, one more time here?
March 11th, 10 a.m. till noon at the community center.
Yeah, okay.
Also, on March 11th, if you look at the graphic here, we're going to have sandbag training, and all of the city council members are welcome. We'll try to recreate that scene, but we're going to have Chief Hawk has got a sandbag machine coming. Nick Bonstell and Jeff have arranged for the Army Corps to bring a sandbag filling machine to the lot behind Public Safety. We'll have a big pile of sand.
What time is that?
That will be at 6 to 8 p.m.
Oh, that's after hours. Hey, good.
6 to 8, is that what you said?
6 to 8.
p.m.
6 to 8 p.m.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to fill as many sandbags as we can. We're gonna try to get that sandbag filling machine to stick around maybe for a couple days after that, so we can fill thousands of these sandbags. The idea is to make them available for both going around some of our public assets, lift stations, Pier Peddler, Marine Office, the sorts of those, because we think the water level's gonna come up a little more, and if it does, and we get some of those fall storms, we're gonna have some significant swells coming up and threatening some of our buildings. So we wanna have sandbags ready, if not stored in place. We may store some right along the sides of some of these buildings, just so we're ready to grab them and start stacking them. And I want the Army Corps to teach us how, because I've got a feeling maybe the way that that got drawn might not be the correct way. I've heard you're supposed to stack them 3 deep and 3 across, but Jeff's gonna show us how. He's got a strong back.
You gonna redo the graphic then?
Well, I don't know. That's just you guys getting ready. That's you doing the training.
We're
We're just hiding behind
We're
it.
gonna fix it.
That'll be on the 11th. March 19th is a trip to the U.S. Army Corps in Detroit. We like to go down to that open house. I think I've gotten Bob to say he wants to go. It's Thursday the 19th. That'll be an all-day event. Please let me know if you'd like to attend.
We're having chili dogs?
Could be.
That was a good time last time.
Lafayette, Coney Island for lunch.
Hmm.
And
Very informational.
March 25th is the Capitol Convention, Capitol Conference. It's a day-long event in Lansing. Early bird runs out Wednesday of this week. So if you want to go to that, please let us know. We save money if we get that word today or tomorrow. So we'd like to hear on that. And just finally, the Frozen in Time. I just wanted to compliment Jeremy and the DDA. You know, I'm stuck for 2 hours straight just looking at the same thing, which is kind of staring off. But I could listen and see a lot of faces, so many kids and families, and all you heard was laughter and smiles. Just looking at all these people grinning, having a great time, and just making positive memories about our downtown. And I don't get that when I go to the mall. I don't get that when I go to the big box. I sure don't get that when I get on Amazon. but I do get it when I do go downtown Grand Haven and I see friends, and I saw Mike and Jan come by, I saw Mike and Lisa come by. They don't know I saw them, but I got peripheral vision going on, and they were trying to goof around and make me laugh, but it was a fun afternoon. But just that's authentic, honest, downtown value, and that's why we pay so much attention to what's going on downtown. And a lot of these conversations are kind of difficult, and we work through these things, and we do it because we want to save that area, because it is something special that has been very special for a long time. But that was just such a study, because I was down there this past Saturday when we didn't have an event, and it wasn't quite the same vibe. So the DDA is making some awesome things happen downtown, and these events they put on, every one of them, the Frozen in Time, the Wine About Winter, the Light Night, the things that have been going on and the things that are coming up are well worth the effort and the investment that's going on down there. So thank you, that's all I got, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks. All right, this is our second call to the audience. This time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council come to the podium, speak directly with the mayor, must identify themselves by name and address, and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear your comments for future consideration. Will not have a response at this time.
Somehow I knew this guy'd have more to say.
3 minutes.
Dave Walters and I were having a brief conversation back here, and an officer led us out of the room. It was probably the first time either of us ever stopped talking. Frozen in Time. I told Dave what I wanted to say about him. I didn't want to say it, him not being here, and it's really a note of great appreciation. At the last Board of Light and Power meeting, he and I had a rather sharp disagreement. I wrote him a brief email the next morning to try to clarify it. That began a correspondence that has now gone to over 10 single-spaced pages of email. He even wrote to me when he was in Washington on a bit of a holiday. I really appreciate that. He's taught me a lot. I would like to think that I have made a somewhat different framework possible for him. We talked out in the hall. We've agreed to continue disagreeing. Wouldn't you love to see a debate between the two of us some night? That would really do you in. I do want to say, in support of what Ryan is saying, I think, and you know, you could say, why is he bringing up the power plant and the future and everything? We didn't get to that yet. Well, you did and didn't. The problem with this whole thing is it's back-asswards in a lot of ways. There's a slippery slope. There's a catch-22, and all of a sudden we're going to discover, oh, no, we approved that long ago. That's why I have to talk about that power plant every chance I get. And I have to try to talk to you about the future, because that's what we are responsible for. I want to respond to what you said about us owning it someday, because I want to tell you what you'd own. By the way, I disagreed with a number of things Dave said. I think his facts are wrong on a number of things, but that's between him and me. But I will tell you that no less an organization than Goldman Sachs has said they'll have nothing more to do with fracking. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Chase Morgan, or whatever the hell their name is now, also has said, has issued a report letting the world know where we're going and where we're going to be in 2040. If you have that plant here, you will have an object of shame. You will have something that people will come in here and say, didn't they know? How could they have ever built a plant like that? When you take your daughter or your granddaughter or whoever it is, and she says, Grandpa, didn't you know? Well, you better know. And I'll give you one other part of that. I've tried to talk about fracking in this country, but you got to talk about what's coming in 2040 as a result of fracking, as a result of factory farming, as a result of a number of other things I could tell you about. I'm going to go real fast. When we drill in the Arctic, you are releasing viruses that have been down there for thousands of years that are going to make this coronavirus look like a picnic. And when you think about the results of our Encopretic president's actions, you will realize that the two countries that are on a pace right now to bring us to 4 degrees Celsius are China and the United States. And in closing, if you bring a Trojan horse into your city, you know what happened with the Trojan horse, right? They let them all out and it ended the Trojan. If you bring a Trojan horse into your city, prepare to be fracked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I will declare this meeting adjourned.